Single dad's card declined at restaurant owner realizes he's the food critic. She's expecting a broke father turns red with shame when his card fails. But when the kind-hearted owner steps in to help, she has no idea she just comped the meal of the man whose review could destroy or save her entire life. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun filtered through faded curtains, casting warm patches of light across the small kitchen counter where Ethan Cole stood mixing pancake batter. His hands moved with practiced precision, whisking the ingredients together just like he'd done hundreds of times before when reviewing five-star restaurants. "Can I add the chocolate chips, Daddy?" Lily bounced on her tiptoes beside him, her dark curls still messy from sleep. She clutched a half-empty bag of chocolate chips, some already disappearing into her mouth when she thought he wasn't looking. "Birthday girl gets chocolate chip duty," Ethan smiled, sliding the mixing bowl closer to her. "But save some for the pancakes, chef," Lily giggled, carefully sprinkling chips into the batter. "I'm not the chef you are. Remember when you used to write about all those fancy restaurants?" Ethan's smile faltered slightly, but he kept his voice light. "That was a while ago, sweetie. Now I get to be your personal pancake chef instead." The kitchen was small but tidy, with worn countertops and a temperamental stove that needed just the right touch. Their apartment wasn't much, nothing like the house they'd had before, but Ethan had worked hard to make it feel like home. Crayon drawings covered the fridge, mostly Lily's artwork depicting their little family of two, sometimes with angels that looked suspiciously like her mother watching from above. As Ethan poured the batter onto the griddle, his phone buzzed. Another rejection email from a publishing house. They still remembered the scandal. He quickly tucked the phone away, focusing instead on the perfect golden brown circles forming on the pan. "Look, Daddy, this one looks like a heart." Lily pointed excitedly at a slightly misshapen pancake. "Must be because it's full of love," Ethan said, flipping it with a flourish that made Lily clap. While they ate at their small kitchen table, Ethan opened his laptop to check his bank account. The numbers made his stomach twist. His last freelance article hadn't paid much, and rent was due soon. But looking at Lily's face, smeared with syrup and pure joy, he couldn't bear to disappoint her. "So, birthday girl, what would you like to do today?" Lily's eyes lit up. "Can we go to a real restaurant, like we used to with Mommy?" The question squeezed Ethan's heart. 3 years had passed since Sarah's death, but moments like these still caught him off guard. "Of course we can, sweetheart. Any special requests?" "Somewhere with dessert," Lily declared, then added more softly, "Mommy always let me have dessert on my birthday." "Then dessert it is." Ethan reached across the table to wipe a spot of syrup from her chin. First, though, somebody needs to get ready for school. While Lily rushed off to change, Ethan quickly did the dishes, his mind racing through calculations. He had exactly $43.27 in his checking account. His credit card was nearly maxed out, but surely he could manage one special dinner. His daughter deserved that much. The day passed in a blur of routine, dropping Lily at school, then hunching over his laptop in the local library, churning out generic articles about 10 best kitchen gadgets and top travel destinations on a budget. The irony wasn't lost on him. Once, his reviews could make or break a restaurant. Now, he wrote clickbait for pennies per word. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Ethan walked hand in hand with Lily down Willow Creek's Main Street. The small town had become their refuge after the scandal forced them to leave the city. Here, where few people knew his name or his past, they could almost pretend to be normal. "Look, Daddy?" Lily tugged on his hand, pointing to a warmly lit storefront. "That place looks nice." Ethan followed her gaze to a quaint diner with large windows that glowed invitingly. A hand-painted sign read, "Mary Ann's Table," in elegant script, and through the glass, he could see cozy booths filled with happy families. The smell of home cooking wafted out whenever the door opened, making his stomach rumble appreciatively, his professional palate recognizing quality even from outside. "Perfect choice, birthday girl." Ethan squeezed her hand, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety in his chest. The prices posted in the window seemed reasonable enough. They could make this work. They had to. Looking down at Lily's excited face, framed by the golden sunset and the warm lights of the diner, Ethan felt a familiar ache. She looked so much like Sarah in that moment, the same hopeful eyes, the same gentle spirit. He'd failed at so many things in his life, but he wouldn't fail at giving his daughter one perfect birthday dinner. "Ready for your birthday feast, Princess Lily?" he asked, adjusting her little cardigan and smoothing her curls. "Ready." She bounced on her toes, then looked up at him with sudden seriousness. "Daddy, I'm glad we came here instead of somewhere fancy. It looks like the kind of place where they serve love with the food." Ethan's throat tightened. Trust his daughter to say something so profound without even trying. "You might be right about that, sweetheart," he managed, holding the door open as the warm aromas and gentle chatter beckoned them inside. The bell above the door chimed softly as Ethan and Lily stepped into Marianne's table. The warmth inside wrapped around them like a comfortable blanket, carrying the mingled aromas of fresh-baked cornbread and something savory simmering on the stove. Mismatched chairs and cheerful colors surrounded sturdy wooden tables, each one topped with a small vase holding wildflowers. "Welcome to Marianne's," a woman's voice called out from behind the counter. She appeared moments later, wiping her hands on a flour-dusted apron. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and despite the tired lines around her eyes, her smile lit up her whole face. "I'm Marianne. Table for two?" "Yes, please," Ethan replied, while Lily half hid behind his leg, suddenly shy. Marianne's eyes softened as she noticed Lily. She crouched down to the little girl's eye level. "Well, hello there, sweetheart. I love your butterfly hair clips. They remind me of the ones that visit my garden." Lily's face brightened. "Really? You have a garden?" "I sure do, right out back." Marianne straightened up and grabbed 2 menus. "Would you like to sit by the window? You can see some of my flowers from there." "Can we, Daddy?" Lily was already moving toward the booth, Marianne indicated, her shyness forgotten. The vinyl seats squeaked as they settled in, and Marianne handed them their menus. "Our special tonight is meatloaf with garden vegetables, but everything's made fresh daily," she winked at Lily, "including our milkshakes." Lily's eyes went wide. "Daddy, it's my birthday. Can I have a milkshake?" Ethan glanced at the prices on the menu, doing quick mental math. The meatloaf special was reasonable, and if they shared a side. "Of course you can, birthday girl. What flavor would you like?" "Chocolate," Lily declared, then added politely to Marianne, "Please. Birthday milkshake coming right up." Marianne's eyes crinkled warmly. "And how old are we celebrating?" 8. Lily held up her fingers to demonstrate. 8 is a wonderful age," Marianne said. "I'll make sure to put an extra cherry on top for such a special occasion." While Marianne went to prepare the milkshake, Ethan studied the menu. Everything sounded simple but good, the kind of honest cooking that had first drawn him to food criticism before he'd gotten caught up in the glamour of fine dining. "What looks good to you, sweetheart?" he asked Lily, who was coloring on the children's menu with crayons Marianne had provided. "Can I have the grilled cheese with tomato soup?" She looked up, hopefully. It had been her mother's favorite comfort food combination. Perfect choice. Ethan's voice only caught slightly. When Marianne returned with Lily's milkshake topped with whipped cream, chocolate sprinkles, and 2 cherries, Ethan ordered their meals. "The grilled cheese and tomato soup for my daughter, and I'll have the meatloaf special." "Excellent choices." Marianne jotted down their order. "That meatloaf's my grandmother's recipe. She always said the secret ingredient was love." Lily took a big sip of her milkshake, leaving a whipped cream mustache. "That's what Daddy says about his pancakes. Is that right?" Marianne's eyes met Ethan's with genuine warmth. "Sounds like your daddy knows his way around a kitchen." "He used to," Lily began, but Ethan gently interrupted. "I just like cooking for my girl." He handed Lily a napkin for her mustache. The food arrived quickly, steam rising from the bowls. The meatloaf was perfectly seasoned, with a side of roasted vegetables that tasted like summer. Ethan couldn't help analyzing the flavors, the subtle hints of herbs, the perfect balance of seasonings. It was the kind of cooking that reminded him why he'd fallen in love with food in the first place. Lily dunked her grilled cheese into the tomato soup, just like Sarah used to do. "This is the best birthday dinner ever, Daddy." "I'm glad, sweetheart." Ethan smiled, pushing aside thoughts of previous birthdays in fancy restaurants. They were halfway through their meal when Lily's elbow caught her milkshake glass. The thick chocolate drink spilled across the table, threatening to drip onto her dress. "Oh no!" Her lower lip trembled. Before Ethan could react, Marianne was there with a stack of napkins. "No worries, honey. Spills are just part of life." She efficiently cleaned up the mess, then disappeared and returned with a fresh half milkshake. "Here you go, backup birthday shake, on the house." "What do you say, Lily?" Ethan prompted. "Thank you." Lily beamed at Marianne. "You're like a fairy godmother." Marianne laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Well, that's a first. Usually, I'm just the soup fairy. The rest of the meal passed in comfortable conversation. Marianne stopped by their table between serving other customers, sharing stories about her garden and listening to Lily's excited chatter about school. For the first time in months, Ethan felt himself truly relaxing, almost like a normal father having dinner with his daughter. But reality crashed back when Marianne brought the check. Ethan reached for his wallet, trying to keep his hand steady as he pulled out his card. The total wasn't outrageous, but it was more than he had available. Still, maybe the payment would go through. Sometimes there was a delay in his freelance deposits. Marianne ran the card through the reader. The machine beeped once, twice. Her smile faltered slightly as she tried again. The third beep seemed to echo through the now quiet diner. "I'm sorry, sir," Marianne said softly. "It seems the card isn't going through." Heat crept up Ethan's neck as he felt other diners' eyes turn toward their table. Lily's bright smile faded, confusion crossing her young face. "Daddy?" she whispered. "Is something wrong?" The shame was overwhelming. Ethan stared at the declined card in his trembling hand, all the warmth of the evening evaporating in an instant of pure humiliation. Marianne's heart clenched as she watched the color drain from Ethan's face. The declined card sat on the table like a guilty verdict, its bright plastic surface reflecting the warm overhead lights that suddenly seemed too bright, too exposing. The father's hands trembled slightly as he reached for his wallet again, his fingers fumbling through the worn leather compartments with the desperate hope that another card might somehow work where the first had failed. She recognized that look all too well, the mix of shame and desperation that came with wanting to give your child something special, only to fall short when it mattered most. The sound of hushed conversations from other tables seemed to fade into the background as Marianne felt the familiar tug in her chest, the same pull she'd felt countless times over the years when someone walked through her doors carrying more than they could handle. "Sarah?" Marianne called softly to the young waitress hovering nearby, her voice barely above a whisper. The 19-year-old had been working at the diner for 6 months now, putting herself through community college, one shift at a time. She gestured for the girl to join her behind the counter, away from the dining area where conversations continued in low murmurs. Speaking in hushed tones that wouldn't carry beyond the coffee station, Marianne leaned closer. "Mark that one as comped, honey. Table 4. "The whole thing?" Sarah's eyes widened, glancing at the ticket clipped to the order wheel. The total wasn't small, 2 full dinners, dessert, drinks. "But Mrs. Porter, that's nearly $40. Every bite." Marianne's tone was gentle but firm, carrying the weight of years spent making decisions with her heart rather than her head. She straightened her flour-dusted apron, the one with the small tear near the pocket that she'd been meaning to replace for months, and walked back toward the table where Ethan was still fumbling with his wallet. Lily's eyes had grown wider with worry, her small hands clasped together in her lap as she watched her father's growing distress. The walk across the diner's worn linoleum felt longer than usual, each step measured and purposeful. Other diners glanced up briefly from their conversations and meals, sensing something in the air but not quite understanding what was unfolding at table 4. "Mr. Cole?" Marianne's voice carried warmth as she approached their table, the same tone she'd used with countless customers over the years, the one that somehow managed to make everyone feel like they were visiting an old friend's kitchen. "I completely forgot to mention we have a special tradition here at Marianne's table." She smiled directly at Lily, whose small face lifted with curiosity, hope flickering back into her dark eyes. "First-time guests eat free. It's our way of saying, 'Welcome to the family.'" The lie rolled off her tongue as smooth as honey, practiced from years of finding creative ways to help those who needed it most. Behind the counter, Sarah watched with understanding dawning on her face, while Mike peered through the kitchen window, shaking his head but wearing the smallest hint of a smile. Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes meeting hers with a mix of disbelief and gratitude that made her chest tighten. She could see him processing her words, weighing them against his pride, his need to provide for his daughter warring with the relief her offer provided. "Oh, no, I couldn't possibly. I insist." Marianne's voice held that special tone that mothers perfect over years of dealing with stubborn children, kind but absolutely unchangeable, with just enough authority to brook no argument. "It's our policy." She picked up the check with a theatrical flourish that made Lily giggle, the sound bright and clear in the cozy diner. The paper disappeared into her apron pocket like a magic trick, taking with it the weight that had been pressing down on the small table. "That's really nice." Lily said, beaming up at Marianne with the kind of pure, uncomplicated joy that only children possessed. "Daddy, isn't that nice? She's like a fairy godmother, but for food." The innocent observation brought tears dangerously close to Ethan's eyes. He swallowed hard, his pride warring visibly with relief on his weathered face. The tension in his shoulders began to ease for the first time since they'd walked through the door. "It's very generous. Thank you." His voice was rough with emotion, barely controlled. "We appreciate it more than you know." "Well, we appreciate you choosing our little diner for such a special celebration." Marianne patted Lily's shoulder, feeling the warmth of the child's trust radiating through the simple touch. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. You come back and see us again, okay? I have a feeling you're going to bring us lots of good luck." In the kitchen, Mike, the cook who'd been with Marianne for nearly a decade, shook his head as she pushed through the swinging doors. The familiar creak of the hinges announced her arrival, and the warm, herb-scented air of the kitchen wrapped around her like a comfortable embrace. "Saw that whole thing through the window?" he said, stirring a pot of his famous beef stew with practiced strokes. The rich aroma filled the small space, mingling with the scent of fresh bread and the underlying warmth that seemed to live in the very walls of the diner. "You're too soft-hearted, Mari. Can't keep giving away free meals in this economy." Marianne grabbed a clean dish towel from the stack by the sink and started wiping down the already spotless prep counter, needing something to do with her hands while her heart slowly returned to its normal rhythm. "Sometimes being soft-hearted is exactly what's needed, Mike." She paused in her cleaning, remembering the way Ethan's shoulders had relaxed when she'd taken away that burden, if only for one evening. The relief in his eyes had been worth more than any payment. Some things are worth more than money. Yeah. Mike's gruff voice couldn't hide his own soft heart, the one that had led him to slip extra portions onto plates when he thought hungry customers needed them. He'd been doing it for years, and Marianne had never once called him on it. "But you can't feed the whole town for free. Bills don't pay themselves, and the landlord ain't exactly known for his charitable nature." "Didn't plan to." Marianne smiled, watching through the kitchen window as Ethan helped Lily into her bright pink coat, his movements careful and tender. "Just needed to feed those two tonight. Sometimes that's all we can do, take care of the ones right in front of us." Through the front windows, she could see them stepping out into the cool evening air. The October night had settled over the small town like a comfortable blanket, streetlights beginning to flicker on along Main Street. Lily skipped ahead a few steps, her birthday joy fully restored, her voice carrying back through the glass as she chattered about the cake and the nice lady who made food wishes come true. Ethan paused on the sidewalk, his hand resting on the door handle he'd just released. He turned back, looking up at the warm glow of the diner sign, the one that read Marianne's Table in friendly cursive letters, with smaller text below promising good food, better company. His lips moved in what appeared to be a whisper, and Lily came back to grab his hand, her small fingers wrapping around his larger ones as she nodded her head seriously at whatever he'd said. The small bell above the door chimed one last time as the night wind caught it, a gentle reminder of the lives that pass through these doors every day. Marianne watched father and daughter disappear down the darkening street, their hands clasped tight together, their silhouettes growing smaller under the soft glow of the streetlights until they turned the corner and vanished from view. In the quiet that followed, she found herself wondering about their story, about what had brought them to her diner on this particular night. There had been something in Ethan's eyes, not just embarrassment about the declined card, but a deeper weariness, the kind that came from carrying heavy burdens for too long. And Lily, with her bright spirit and trusting smile, deserved all the birthday magic the world could offer. Marianne smiled to herself as she hung up the dish towel and prepared to close up for the night, unaware that this simple act of kindness had just set in motion a chain of events that would change all their lives forever. The morning sun painted golden streaks across Marianne's table's worn linoleum floor as Marianne unlocked the front door. The familiar jingle of her keys echoed in the empty diner, a sound that had greeted her every morning for the past 15 years. She breathed in deeply, taking in the lingering scent of yesterday's cornbread and coffee. Her comfortable shoes squeaked against the freshly mopped floor as she made her way to the kitchen. The routine was as familiar as breathing: start the coffee, check the prep lists, count the register. But something felt different today. Maybe it was the way last night's act of kindness still warmed her heart, or perhaps it was just the crisp autumn air drifting through the crack under the door. The phone's sharp ring cut through her morning reverie. Marianne wiped her hands on her apron and reached for the receiver mounted on the wall. Marianne's table, this is Marianne speaking. Mrs. Porter? This is David Chin from the Willow Creek Chronicle. The voice was cheerful but professional. Just calling to follow up on our conversation from last week about the upcoming review. Marianne's hand tightened around the phone cord. Oh, yes. The review. Her throat suddenly felt dry. As I mentioned, one of the country's top food critics will be visiting your establishment anonymously this week. Given the current economic climate, these reviews can really make or break local businesses. David's words hung heavy in the air. I just wanted to make sure you were prepared. Marianne glanced around her diner at the mismatched chairs she'd collected over the years, the slightly crooked pictures on the walls, the worn but clean countertops. Her heart started racing. Thank you for the reminder, Mr. Chen. We'll do our best, as always. After hanging up, Marianne leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths. The morning staff would arrive soon, and she needed to appear confident, steady. She gathered herself and walked to the break room where Sarah and Joe, her longtime cook, were hanging up their coats. Morning, everyone, she said, forcing brightness into her voice. Remember what we talked about last week? We might have a special guest dropping by, but I want us to do exactly what we always do. Treat everyone with kindness, serve good food, and let God handle the rest. Sarah nodded earnestly while Joe gave a thumbs up from behind his coffee mug. They'd been through tough times before the recession, the highway bypass that cut off casual traffic, her herald's passing. Somehow, they'd always made it through. Marianne moved through the diner, straightening sugar packets and aligning salt shakers. As she reached the corner booth, the one where the father and daughter had sat last night, something caught her eye. A dark leather wallet lay partially hidden beneath the table's edge. "Oh dear," she murmured, picking it up. It must have fallen from that kind father's pocket when he was trying to pay. What was his name? The little girl had called him Daddy, of course, but Marianne opened the wallet, looking for identification. Her eyes fell first on a few wrinkled bills, carefully arranged, and a photo of the little girl, Lily. She remembered now blowing out birthday candles on a previous cake. Behind that, she found what she was looking for, a press badge and a clear plastic sleeve. The morning light caught the embossed letters as she read them. Ethan Cole, Culinary Review Network. The wallet slipped from her fingers and landed with a soft thud on the table. Marianne's hands began to tremble as the realization crashed over her like a wave. The father with the decline card, the one whose meal she'd comped out of simple kindness, he was the food critic. "I just paid for his meal," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the empty diner. The words seemed to echo off the walls, making the small space feel suddenly vast and uncertain. Her legs felt weak, and she sank into the nearest chair. The critic had already come. He'd sat right here, eaten her food, experienced her service, and she'd had no idea. Not only that, but his card had declined, and she'd covered his bill. What would he write about that? Would he think it was a ploy? Would he assume she'd somehow known who he was? Through the window, Marianne could see the first rays of sunlight touching the tops of the buildings across the street. The day was beginning, bringing with it all its uncertainties and possibilities. She stared at the wallet on the table, her mind racing with questions about what this could mean for her diner's future. The afternoon sun warmed the weathered sign of Marianne's table as Ethan Cole stood outside, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. In his hands, he clutched a modest bouquet of purple and yellow wildflowers, freshly picked from the meadow near his apartment. A folded note peeked out from between the stems, his neat handwriting visible on its edges. "Come on, Daddy." Lily tugged at his sleeve, her other hand gripping a colorful, homemade card covered in glitter and crayon drawings. Ethan took a deep breath. "Just give me a minute, sweetheart." His cheeks flushed, remembering last night's embarrassment. But something about this place, about Marianne's kindness, pulled him back. The bell above the door chimed as they entered. The diner hummed with the quiet conversation of a few regular customers. Marianne stood behind the counter, her graying hair tucked beneath a pale blue bandana, counting change from the register. She looked up at the sound of the bell, and her eyes widened slightly. "Well, hello again." Her smile was genuine, warming her tired features. "Miss Porter," Ethan started, then cleared his throat. "I wanted to properly thank you for last night." He extended the wildflowers, his hands slightly trembling. and to apologize for putting you in that position." Marianne's eyes softened as she accepted the flowers. "These are beautiful." She brought them to her nose, inhaling their sweet fragrance. "And please, call me Marianne. I'm Ethan," he said, then added quickly, "Ethan Cole." He watched her face carefully, but she showed no sign of recognition. "And you've met my daughter, Lily. Best pancakes ever." Lily burst forward, thrusting her handmade card toward Marianne. Glitter scattered across the counter like tiny stars. Marianne laughed, a sound that filled the diner with warmth. "Why, thank you, sweetheart." She carefully opened the card, treating it like a precious artifact. "Look at these wonderful drawings. Is this me?" She pointed to a stick figure with curly hair and a big smile. "Uh-huh, and that's Daddy and me." Lily pointed to two smaller figures. "See, we're all happy because your food is magic." "Magic, huh?" Marianne's eyes crinkled at the corners. She reached across the counter and squeezed Lily's hand. "Sometimes a little kindness is the best magic there is." Ethan pulled out his wallet. "About the bill from last night." "Now, don't you worry about that," Marianne cut in, waving her hand dismissively. "We all have rough patches. Please," Ethan insisted, his voice quiet but firm. "I'd like to make it right. Maybe not all at once, but—" Marianne studied him for a moment, then nodded. "How about we make a deal? You can help me fix that wobbly table by the window. Been driving me crazy for months." "I can do that." Ethan smiled, relief washing over his face. "I'm pretty handy with tools. Daddy fixes everything." Lily proclaimed proudly. "He even fixed Mrs. Johnson's cabinet next door, and she gave us cookies." "Is that so?" Marianne leaned on the board counter, her eyes twinkling. "Sounds like you two make quite a team." "We have to be," Ethan said softly, running a hand over Lily's hair. "It's just us now." Something in his tone made Marianne pause. She glanced at the empty space beside them, understanding blooming in her eyes. "How long?" she asked gently. 3 years, Ethan replied. "Cancer." The word hung heavy in the air. Marianne nodded slowly. "My Robert's been gone 10 years now. Heart attack." She touched the simple gold band she still wore. "Some days it feels like yesterday." "Does it get easier?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Different," Marianne answered honestly. "Not easier, just different." "You learn to carry it differently." She straightened up, brushing flour from her apron. "But you know what helps? Good food and good company." "Can we stay for lunch?" Lily asked, bouncing on her toes. "Please, Daddy?" Ethan hesitated, but Marianne was already reaching for her order pad. "First-time customer discount still applies." She winked. "And I happen to have a fresh batch of mac and cheese coming out of the oven." "That's Lily's favorite," Ethan said, surprised. "Must be magic after all." Marianne smiled, and for a moment, their eyes met. Something passed between them, understanding, perhaps, or recognition of a shared journey. They settled into a booth near the window, the one with the wobbly table. As Marianne brought over their drinks, chocolate milk for Lily, coffee for Ethan, she couldn't help but notice how Ethan's shoulders had relaxed, how Lily's eyes sparkled with joy. Later, as she watched them walk away down the sun-dappled street, Lily skipping ahead while Ethan called out careful warnings about watching where she was going, Marianne stood in the doorway of her diner. Her fingers traced the edge of Lily's glitter-covered card, now proudly displayed next to the register. "Maybe God sent him here for a reason," she whispered to herself, the words carried away by the gentle afternoon breeze. The morning sun cast long shadows across Willow Creek's farmers market as Marianne pushed her wire shopping cart between stalls of fresh produce. The usual Saturday crowd bustled around her, but today felt different. She could feel eyes following her, hear the whispers barely contained behind raised hands. "Did you see him?" Mrs. Peterson, the baker's wife, nudged her friend as Marianne examined tomatoes at Sam's produce stand. The handsome stranger at Marianne's table brought flowers, he did. Marianne pretended not to hear, carefully selecting firm tomatoes for the day's soup special. Her cheeks warmed, not from the morning sun. "Young fellow," they say, "with a little girl." Another voice chimed in. About time Marianne had someone special coming round. Sam, the elderly farmer, gave Marianne a sympathetic smile as he weighed her tomatoes. "Don't mind them," he said quietly. "Small towns run on gossip like cars run on gas." "Oh, I'm used to it," Marianne replied, but her hands fumbled with her wallet. It's not what they think." He's just a kind man who wanted to say thank you. 3 blocks away, in his small apartment, Ethan sat at his kitchen table, staring at his laptop screen. Another rejection email glowed mockingly. "Thank you for your submission, but your experience doesn't align with our current needs." He rubbed his tired eyes. Since the scandal 2 years ago, when his harsh review had driven a small family restaurant to close, doors kept shutting in his face. His reputation in the food criticism world was poisoned. Even general writing jobs were hard to come by. His name carried too much baggage. Lily's crayon scratched against paper nearby as she drew pictures at the coffee table. "Daddy, are you writing about food again?" she asked without looking up. "Not exactly, sweetheart." Ethan opened a blank document. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. "I'm trying something different." An idea sparked. He began typing. In an age of digital disconnection, small acts of kindness still flourish in America's hometown diners. The words flowed easily as he thought about Marianne's gentle smile, the way she'd saved his dignity without making a show of it. He chose a pen name, Daniel Gray, and submitted the article to the local paper's community section. It wasn't much, but it felt right. Honest, real. Back at Marianne's table, the lunch rush brought new energy. More customers filled the booths than usual, their chatter warming the space like sunshine. Sarah, the teenage waitress, bounced between tables with a spring in her step. "Third time this week, we've run out of your cornbread before 2 o'clock. Sarah reported, grinning. "Whatever you change, it's working." Marianne wiped her hands on her apron, surveying her diner. Nothing had changed in the recipes, the decor, or the service, but something felt different, lighter. Since Ethan and Lily's visits, the atmosphere had shifted. It was as if their genuine gratitude had sparked something contagious. Sometimes, Marianne said, more to herself than Sarah, it just takes one person believing in what you do to remind you why you started. She thought about Ethan's earnest thank you note, now tucked safely in her recipe box. His words had been simple but touched something deep. "Thank you for showing my daughter that kindness still exists in unexpected places." The afternoon passed in a blur of orders and friendly faces. More than once, Marianne caught herself looking up when the bell above the door chimed, half expecting to see Ethan and Lily walking in. They hadn't returned since the flowers, but their presence lingered like a pleasant aroma. As evening settled over Willow Creek, Ethan sat on the edge of Lily's bed, their nightly ritual of story time complete. Her room glowed softly in the light of her star-shaped nightlight, walls covered with her artwork, including her newest drawing of Marianne's table, complete with a smiling stick figure wearing an apron. "Daddy?" Lily's voice was sleepy but thoughtful. "Yes, Princess?" Miss Marianne smiled like Mommy used to. She yawned, snuggling deeper under her butterfly-patterned comforter. "You know, that special smile that makes everything feel better?" Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't expected those words, hadn't realized Lily had noticed such a detail. The comparison to Jenny, gone 3 years now, made his heart squeeze with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Gratitude mixed with a gentle ache. "You're right," he managed, tucking the blanket around her shoulders. "She does have that kind of smile." Lily's eyes drifted closed. "Can we go back sometime?" "Maybe," Ethan whispered, but she was already asleep. He sat there a moment longer, watching his daughter's peaceful face in the dim light. The day's rejection seemed less important now. Something was shifting in their lives, something sparked by a simple act of kindness in a small-town diner. For the first time in years, Ethan felt truly grateful, not for success or recognition, but for the genuine warmth of human connection. The blue glow of the laptop screen illuminated Ethan's tired face as he sat at his small kitchen table. The clock on the microwave blinked 11:47 p.m. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he barely noticed. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, then began to type. There's a place in Willow Creek where kindness isn't just a word, it's served fresh, daily, alongside the best cornbread you'll ever taste. But this isn't your typical restaurant review, because Marianne's table isn't your typical diner. He paused, rubbing his eyes. The words needed to be perfect. Not for his reputation that was long gone, but because something about this felt important. Right. In a world where restaurants compete for stars and acclaim, this small diner on Main Street measures success differently. Here, success is counted in smiles, in second chances, and in the way owner Marianne Porter treats every person who walks through her door like family. Ethan thought about how she'd handled Lily's spilled milkshake, the gentle way she'd saved his dignity when his card declined. He kept typing, "The plates aren't fancy, and you won't find exotic ingredients or elaborate presentations. What you will find is something far rarer, genuine care baked into every meal. The meatloaf tastes like Sunday dinners at Grandma's house. The pancakes come with a side of conversation that makes you feel heard. And sometimes, when you least expect it, you might discover that grace is always on the menu." His fingers flew across the keyboard now, the words flowing naturally. "I've eaten at five-star restaurants across the country. I've tasted dishes that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. But I've never been anywhere that fed my soul quite like Marianne's table. This isn't just a place to eat, it's a reminder that in our rushed, often harsh world, there are still people who believe in the power of a home-cooked meal and a kind word." He signed it simply, "A grateful customer," and posted it on the local community board's website. It was nearly 1 a.m. now. He should sleep, but something made him share the link on a few local Facebook groups first. The next morning, Marianne arrived at the diner earlier than usual. Sarah, her young waitress, practically bounced through the door behind her. "Have you seen it?" Sarah asked, waving her phone. "The review? It's all over local social media." "What review?" Marianne wiped her hands on her apron, frowning slightly. The word review always made her nervous these days, especially knowing somewhere out there was a certain food critic who could make or break her business. Sarah pulled up the post and handed over her phone. Marianne's eyes grew wider as she read, one hand lifting to cover her mouth. The words blurred slightly as tears welled up in her eyes. "Oh my," she whispered, sinking onto one of the vinyl-covered stools at the counter. "Oh my goodness." The review had hundreds of shares already. The comments section overflowed with locals agreeing, sharing their own stories about times Marianne had helped them out or made them feel welcome. Weathered Gardener 53 wrote, "Remember when my John was in the hospital and she sent over dinner every night for a week?" Willow Creek Mom added, "My kids love going there after school. She always has a cookie and a kind word for them." Marianne dabbed at her eyes with a corner of her apron. "I just try to treat people the way the Lord would want," she said softly, "the way I'd want someone to treat my own family." Sarah squeezed her shoulder. "Well, looks like people noticed. The phone's already ringing with breakfast reservations." Across town, Ethan stood at his stove, flipping pancakes while Lily set their small table. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, catching the gold in his daughter's hair. "These aren't as good as Miss Marianne's," Lily observed, watching him cook. Ethan laughed. "Nobody's are as good as Miss Marianne, sweetheart." He slid a slightly lopsided pancake onto her plate. "But you know what? I think things might be turning around for us." "Really?" Lily's face brightened. "How come?" "Sometimes," he said, sitting down across from her, "doing something nice for someone else makes your own world a little brighter too." Lily nodded seriously, as if this made perfect sense to her 8-year-old mind. "Like when I share my crayons with Jenny at school, and then she shares her cookies with me at lunch?" "Exactly like that," Ethan smiled, watching his daughter dig into her breakfast. He had no idea that his small act of gratitude, tapped out on a laptop in the middle of the night, was already setting bigger things in motion. The morning sun streamed through their kitchen window, warming their small breakfast table. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt truly hopeful. The simple act of writing that review, of sharing the truth about Marianne's kindness, had lifted something heavy from his heart. The morning sun cast long shadows through the diner's windows as Ethan stood awkwardly at the counter, toolbox in hand. He'd noticed the dripping faucet during his last visit, and something about Marianne's tired eyes made him want to help. "I used to fix things around my old restaurant reviews column office," he explained, trying to sound casual. "It's really no trouble." Marianne wiped her hands on her apron, looking uncertain. "I don't want to impose." "You must be busy with." She trailed off, still keeping his secret. "Dad's really good at fixing stuff." Lily chimed in from beside him, her purple backpack still on from school. "He made our toaster work again with just a screwdriver." Marianne's eyes softened at Lily's enthusiasm. "Well, that drip has been driving me crazy for weeks. The plumber wants $200 just to look at it." She gestured toward the kitchen. "If you're sure it's no trouble." "None at all," Ethan said, following her through the swinging doors. The kitchen was warm and smelled of cinnamon. A pot of soup simmered on the stove, and fresh rolls cooled on wire racks. As Ethan crouched under the sink, Marianne handed him tools. "So, what made you want to work with restaurants?" she asked carefully, testing the waters. Ethan paused, wrench in hand. Would you believe it started with my grandmother's recipes? He adjusted a pipe fitting. She had this tiny Italian place in Boston, nothing fancy, but the food. He smiled at the memory. It told stories, you know? I do know, Marianne said softly. She leaned against the counter, lost in thought. That's why I started collecting recipes. I wanted to write a cookbook once, Comfort Food for the Soul, or something like that. Why didn't you? She shrugged. Life happens. After Tom, my husband, passed, keeping the diner running took everything I had. She straightened some cups on the counter. Dreams sometimes have to wait. Mom, Miss Marianne. Lily's voice carried from the dining room. Can I help serve water to people, please? Marianne called back. Come get an apron, sweetie. I'll show you how we do it. They watched as Lily carefully carried water glasses to tables, her face serious with concentration. Customers smiled at her determined expression, and she beamed with pride. She's good with people, Marianne observed, just like her daddy. Ethan tightened the last fitting. I used to be, before. He let the sentence hang there, focusing on the pipe instead. Before what? Marianne asked gently. Ethan stood, wiping his hands on a rag. Before I forgot that restaurants aren't just about food, they're about people. He tested the faucet. No more drips. One bad review I wrote. It destroyed someone's dream, their whole life's work. I was so focused on being clever, on maintaining my reputation, that I didn't think about the human cost. Marianne touched his arm lightly. But you're thinking about it now. Too late for that, chef, Ethan said quietly. His restaurant closed. He moved away. Nobody would hire him after what I wrote. It's never too late to change, Marianne said, moving to check the soup. Look at me, 52 years old, still dreaming about that cookbook. You should write it, Ethan said suddenly. Your food, these recipes, they deserve to be shared. Maybe someday, she smiled, stirring the soup. When the timing's right. They worked side by side for the next hour, Ethan fixing a wobbly shelf while Marianne prepared for the dinner rush. Lily proudly reported that she hadn't spilled a single drop of water. As the afternoon light began to fade, Ethan gathered his tools. Thank you for letting me help, he said. It felt good to fix something for once, instead of breaking things, he thought but didn't say. Thank you for caring enough to try, Marianne replied. She watched as Lily hugged each regular customer goodbye. Later, after Ethan and Lily had left, Marianne stood outside her diner. The evening air was cool, and the Marianne's table sign cast a warm glow over the sidewalk. As she turned the key in the lock, she smiled softly. Maybe second chances come disguised as leaky faucets. The morning sun streamed through Marianne's table's windows, casting warm patterns across the checkered tablecloths. The usual breakfast crowd filled the diner with cheerful chatter and the clink of coffee cups. Ethan moved between tables with practiced ease, clearing dishes and wiping surfaces clean. His sleeves were rolled up and a dish towel hung from his back pocket, a far cry from his former life as a prestigious food critic. Order up, called Jimmy from the kitchen. Marianne hustled past Ethan with 2 steaming plates of biscuits and gravy. Need help with those? Ethan asked, already reaching for one of the plates. I've got it, Marianne said with a smile. But could you refill Mrs. Henderson's coffee? She always likes it when you stop to chat about her grandkids. Ethan nodded, grabbing the coffee pot. Over the past few weeks, he'd learned all the regulars' names and stories. Mrs. Henderson showed him new photos of her grandchildren every Tuesday. Mr. Peterson, the retired mailman, always ordered wheat toast with his eggs. Sarah, the young nurse who worked night shifts, came in for pie and coffee at odd hours. At a corner table, Lily sat doing her homework, occasionally looking up to beam at her father or wave at Marianne. Colored pencils and paper were scattered around her math workbook. She held up her latest drawing proudly when Marianne passed by. Look what I made, Lily exclaimed. The picture showed 3 stick figures holding hands outside what was clearly meant to be the diner. Marianne's heart melted when she saw how Lily had drawn big smiles on both her father's face and Marianne's. It's beautiful, sweetheart, Marianne said, touching Lily's shoulder gently. We'll have to put this one up on the wall with your others. Behind the counter, Betty, the senior waitress, watched the interaction with knowing eyes. She'd worked at the diner for 15 years and had never seen Marianne quite so animated. When Ethan first started helping around the place, Betty had been skeptical, but there was no denying the positive change he'd brought, not just to Marianne, but to the whole atmosphere of the diner. The lunch rush came and went, Regular customers seemed to linger longer these days, drawn by the warm environment and genuine care that radiated from both Marianne and Ethan. Word had spread through town about the diner where everyone was treated like family, where Grace was served alongside the daily special. "Did you see we had 3 new families come in today?" Marianne mentioned to Ethan as they restocked napkin dispensers together. Their hands brushed occasionally, neither pulling away too quickly. "I noticed," Ethan replied. "That mother with the twins said her friend told her about your chicken pot pie?" "Our chicken pot pie," Marianne corrected him with a gentle nudge. "That was your grandmother's recipe we tried last week, remember?" Ethan ducked his head, pleased but embarrassed. "Just a small suggestion. Your cooking makes it special." Throughout the afternoon, Lily moved between helping with small tasks and working on more drawings. She'd become the diner's unofficial greeter, her natural charm warming even the grumpiest customers. Several regulars had taken to bringing her small treats or books, making the diner feel more like an extended family's living room than a business. The staff exchanged knowing glances whenever Marianne and Ethan worked side by side in comfortable silence, or when one would automatically finish the other's sentence. There was an ease between them that hadn't existed in the diner before. Even Jimmy, the usually gruff cook, had softened, teaching Ethan some of his secret recipes during slow periods. As evening approached, the dinner crowd thinned out. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, visible through the diner's large front windows. Lily had fallen asleep in her favorite booth, her latest drawing clutched in her hand. "Another masterpiece?" Ethan asked softly, as Marianne gently took the paper from Lily's grasp. Marianne smiled at the crayon creation. This one showed the diner surrounded by hearts, with Daddy and Miss Marianne's table written in wobbly letters across the top. After the last customer left, Ethan and Marianne moved through their closing routine with practiced efficiency. They worked in comfortable silence, straightening chairs, wiping down surfaces, and checking supplies for the next day. Betty and Jimmy had already left, leaving them alone except for sleeping Lily. The night air was cool and sweet when they finally stepped out onto the front porch. Marianne had made them each a cup of coffee, his black, hers with a splash of cream, just as they'd come to prefer during these quiet evening moments. They settled into the old wooden chairs that had seen countless sunset conversations. The street was peaceful, with only occasional cars passing by. A gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming jasmine from Mrs. Henderson's garden across the street. Marianne wrapped her hands around her warm coffee mug and looked at Ethan. His presence had become so natural, it was hard to remember the diner without him. "It's been nice having you around," she said softly, her voice carrying all the warmth of the coffee they shared. Ethan gazed at the familiar storefront, at the windows still glowing softly from inside, at the sign that had come to mean so much more than just a place to eat. He thought about Lily sleeping peacefully inside, about the way his daughter smiled more these days, about how the knot of anxiety in his chest had slowly unwound in this place. "Feels like home," he replied simply, meaning every word. They sat together in companionable silence, sipping their coffee and watching the last colors fade from the sky. While inside the diner, Lily's drawings watched over them from their place of honor on the wall. The streetlights cast long shadows across the empty sidewalk as Ethan sat on the bench outside Marianne's table. His phone glowed in the darkness, illuminating his tired face as he read the email for the 5th time. "Dear Mr. Cole, while we appreciate your interest in contributing to our publication, given your previous situation, we cannot offer you a position at this time. Your reputation in the industry remains a concern." He closed his eyes and let his head fall back against the wooden slats. The night air was cool, carrying the lingering scent of fried onions and fresh bread from the diner's kitchen. His finger hovered over the delete button, but he couldn't bring himself to erase yet another rejection. The soft chime of the diner's door broke through his thoughts. Footsteps approached, followed by the gentle rustle of fabric as someone sat beside him. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Marianne's voice was warm, concerned. Ethan tried to smile but couldn't quite manage it. "Not worth that much tonight. I saw you sitting out here from the kitchen window." She settled more comfortably on the bench. "Been watching you stare at that phone for 20 minutes. That obvious, huh?" Only to someone who's done their share of late-night worrying. She pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. "Want to talk about it?" Ethan locked his phone screen, plunging them into deeper darkness. The street was quiet, except for the distant sound of crickets and the hum of the diner's neon sign. "Got an email from my old editor," he finally said. "Seems my name's still mud in the publishing world." Marianne stayed silent, waiting. You ever make a mistake so big it feels like it defines your whole life? His voice cracked slightly. We all have chapters we wish we could rewrite, she said softly. Ethan let out a heavy breath. 3 years ago, I was at the top of my game, food critic for one of the biggest networks in the country. My reviews could make or break a restaurant. He paused, swallowing hard. I got cocky, started believing my own hype. A car drove past, its headlights briefly illuminating their faces before darkness settled again. There was this small family restaurant in Boston, he continued. Chef had put his whole life into it, but I was having a bad day. My wife had just passed away. I was angry at the world. He shook his head. I wrote the meanest review of my career. Didn't just criticize the food. I got personal. Called him a hack. Said he should stick to flipping burgers. What happened? Marianne asked gently. The restaurant closed within a month. The chef, he had a breakdown. Lost everything. Ethan's voice grew thick with emotion. His daughter wrote me a letter afterward. Told me how her father had spent 30 years saving for that restaurant. How my words had destroyed not just his business, but his spirit. Marianne reached over and placed her hand on his arm. The touch was light but grounding. The story went viral. People started digging up my old reviews, finding patterns of cruelty I hadn't even noticed myself. The network fired me. Other publications blacklisted me. He gave a hollow laugh. Turns out karma has quite an appetite. Is that why you're here in Willow Creek? Needed a fresh start. Somewhere Lily could grow up without carrying her dad's baggage. He turned to look at Marianne. But every rejection reminder hits like the first time. The diner's lights spilled out onto the sidewalk, creating a warm glow around them. Inside, the last customers were finishing their meals, their muted laughter drifting through the windows. Marianne was quiet for a moment, then spoke thoughtfully. You know, every morning when I open the diner, I say a little prayer. Not for success or money, but for the chance to feed someone who needs more than just a meal. She turned to face him fully. Maybe forgiveness starts when you feed others again, not with criticism or judgment, but with kindness. The way you've been doing here. Here, I've seen how you help our customers, how you listen to their stories, remember their names. The way you fixed Mrs. Henderson's chair without being asked, or taught Tommy how to properly hold his fork. She smiled. That's feeding people too, Ethan, just in a different way. The truth of her words settled over him like a warm blanket. Above them, stars twinkled in the clear night sky, and the diner's lights flickered softly behind them, casting their bench in a gentle glow. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who understood loss and redemption, sharing the quiet blessing of a moment under the stars. For the first time in years, Ethan felt the weight of his past lifting slightly, replaced by something that felt surprisingly like hope. The morning sun painted Willow Creek's town square in shades of amber and gold. Fallen leaves crunched beneath boots and wagon wheels as vendors set up their booths for the annual Harvest Festival. The air carried the mingled scents of cinnamon, wood smoke, and the promise of autumn memories waiting to be made. At the corner of Main and Maple, Marianne Porter wiped her brow as she arranged her booth's checkered tablecloth. Her famous cornbread, still warm from the oven, sat in neat rows beside mason jars of honey butter. The worn sign from her diner hung proudly above, Marianne's table where everyone's family. Need a hand with that grill? Ethan's voice came from behind her. He wore a plain blue shirt with rolled-up sleeves, looking more at ease than she'd ever seen him. Oh, thank heavens, Marianne said, brushing flour from her apron. These old hands aren't as steady as they used to be with heavy lifting. Together, they positioned the large grill, their movements now familiar after weeks of working side by side at the diner. Lily skipped around them, wearing a child-size apron with Junior Chef embroidered across the front. Can I help arrange the cookies, Miss Marianne? Lily asked, her eyes bright with excitement. Of course, sweetheart. Just like we practiced chocolate chip on the blue plates, snickerdoodles on the red. As the morning progressed, the square filled with townspeople. Children chased each other through piles of leaves while parents balanced plates of festival food. The local band set up near the gazebo, their folksy tunes mixing with laughter and conversation. Ethan worked the grill like he'd done it all his life. Not like someone who'd spent years dining in five-star restaurants. His hands moved confidently as he flipped burgers and grilled corn, chatting easily with customers. The careful, guarded expression he usually wore had softened into genuine smiles. Best burger I've had in years, declared old Mr. Thompson, taking another big bite. What's your secret, son? The secret? Ethan glanced at Marianne, who was serving her cornbread to a growing line of people. It's about remembering that food isn't just fuel, it's about connection. Every meal has a story. A small crowd gathered as he spoke, drawn by his quiet passion. Even the mayor stopped to listen, her festival ribbon slightly askew as she leaned in. You know, Ethan continued, his voice carrying naturally across the interested faces. I used to think fine dining was about perfect presentation and exotic ingredients. But here in Willow Creek, I've learned it's about something else entirely. He gestured toward Marianne's booth, where she was showing Lily how to drizzle honey just right. It's about the heart behind every meal, the care that goes into making sure nobody leaves hungry, the way a simple act of kindness can change someone's whole day or even their life. People nodded, some wiping away tears. Marianne stood still, her hand pressed to her heart, listening as Ethan spoke about grace and second chances, about finding hope in unexpected places. The crowd broke into spontaneous applause when he finished. Soon, the line at Marianne's booth stretched across the square. People weren't just buying food, they were sharing stories, hugging, connecting. As afternoon faded into evening, strings of lights flickered to life overhead. The band switched to slower songs, and couples began swaying on the makeshift dance floor near the gazebo. "Daddy, Miss Marianne doesn't have anyone to dance with," Lily observed, her voice carrying that particular tone children use when they're being obviously subtle. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, hesitating. But then he saw Marianne standing alone by their booth, the twinkling lights reflecting in her eyes, and something in his chest tightened. "Miss Porter," he said formally, extending his hand, "would you honor me with this dance?" Marianne's cheeks flushed pink. "Oh, I haven't danced in years." "Neither have I," he admitted with a gentle smile. "We can be rusty together." She placed her hand in his, and he led her to the edge of the dance floor. The band played a slow waltz, and they began to move, a bit awkwardly at first, then finding their rhythm. "Thank you," Marianne said softly, "for what you said earlier. About the heart behind the meal. I meant every word." His voice was quiet but sure. "You taught me that, you know." That night with Lily's birthday dinner, they swayed together under the twinkling lights, neither speaking for a moment. The evening air was cool, but Marianne felt warm, safe. Ethan's hand was steady at her waist, and she could smell the subtle scent of his aftershave mixed with wood smoke from the grill. Lily watched from nearby, sharing a cookie with her new friend Emma, both girls giggling and pointing at their dancing adults. As the song continued, Marianne let herself relax into the moment. For the first time since losing her husband, she felt that familiar flutter of possibility in her heart. She saw it reflected in Ethan's eyes too, that cautious hope, that wonder at finding something precious and unexpected. The lights sparkled overhead like stars brought down to earth, and the music wrapped around them like a gentle embrace. In that moment, as they moved together under the autumn sky, both Marianne and Ethan allowed themselves to imagine what it might be like to build something new, something beautiful, from all their broken pieces. The morning after the festival dawned bright and clear, with sunlight streaming through the diner's windows in golden patches. The usual breakfast crowd hadn't arrived yet, but Ethan and Lily were already seated at their usual corner booth. The events of last night's dance still lingered in the air like the sweet scent of baking that wafted from the kitchen. Marianne emerged from the swinging kitchen doors carrying a plate that made Ethan's eyes widen. Golden brown biscuits, perfectly round and flaky, steamed in the cool morning air. "These," she announced with a hint of pride, "are my grandmother's secret recipe. She used to make them every Sunday morning after church." She set the plate down, along with a small jar of honey and fresh butter. Lily bounced in her seat. "They look like clouds." "They sure do, sweetie." Marianne's eyes crinkled at the corners as she smiled. "And they taste even better than they look. My grandmother always said that comfort food should hug your soul." Ethan picked up one of the biscuits, still warm to the touch. The outside was perfectly crisp, and when he pulled it apart, steam rose from the tender, layered interior. He took a bite and closed his eyes. "This," he said after a moment, "might be the best biscuit I've ever tasted. And I've tasted a lot of biscuits." "Oh, stop!" Marianne waved her hand dismissively, but her cheeks flushed pink. "You're just saying that because we danced together last night." "I would never compromise my culinary integrity," Ethan replied with mock seriousness, then winked. "Even for such an excellent dance partner." Lily giggled, her hands covering her mouth as she looked between them. "Daddy's being silly again." He only gets silly when he really likes someone. Now was Ethan's turn to blush. He cleared his throat and reached for another biscuit, trying to hide his embarrassment. Mary Ann tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, her eyes sparkling. Well, I suppose I better get back to the kitchen before these two charmers completely destroy my professional composure. She turned to go, then paused. Oh, Ethan? If you're not busy, later, the garden out back needs some attention. I've been meaning to fix it up, but say no more, Ethan replied. Lily and I would love to help, right, kiddo? Lily nodded enthusiastically, her mouth full of biscuit. The afternoon found them in the small patch of earth behind the diner. Years of neglect had left it wild and overgrown, but Ethan could see its potential. He'd already cleared away the weeds and turned the soil, while Lily collected rocks to line the flower beds. Mary Ann brought out ice-cold lemonade and watched as Ethan carefully planted purple coneflowers and black-eyed Susans. His hands, usually so precise with his writing, moved with surprising gentleness as he patted the soil around each plant. My wife loved gardening, he said quietly, almost to himself. She always said flowers were God's way of painting the earth. He looked up at Mary Ann, his eyes soft with memory but not sad. I haven't planted anything since she passed. Mary Ann knelt beside him, her knee brushing against his. Sometimes the hardest steps are the most healing ones. They worked side by side, their shoulders occasionally touching as they dug holes and positioned plants. Lily darted between them, sprinkling water on the newly planted flowers and giving each one a name. This one's Princess Sparkle, she declared, pointing to a purple coneflower. And that yellow one is Sir Sunshine. Very appropriate titles, Ethan agreed solemnly, but his eyes danced with amusement as he glanced at Mary Ann. The afternoon light began to soften, casting long shadows across their work. The garden had transformed. Stone paths now wound between neat beds of flowers, and Ethan had even installed a small wooden bench under the old maple tree. Every good meal deserves a view, he said, standing back to survey their work. Dirt smudged his cheek, and his shirt was damp with honest work. Now your customers can sit out here and enjoy the flowers while they eat. Mary Ann looked at the garden, then at Ethan, her heart full. Here was a man who understood that food wasn't just about taste. It was about creating moments, memories, experiences. Just like her grandmother had taught her. Thank you, she said softly. Both of you. This is more than I could have imagined. We're not quite finished, Ethan replied. He reached into his truck and pulled out one final plant, a rose bush with deep red buds. This one's special. It's called Second Chance. Seemed appropriate. Together they planted the rose bush in the center of the garden. As they worked, their hands met in the soil, and neither pulled away for a moment. Lily watched them with a knowing smile, then skipped off to name more flowers. Later that night, after Ethan and Lily had gone home, Mary Ann stood at the diner's back window. The full moon bathed the garden in silver light, making the flowers look like ethereal dancers in the gentle evening breeze. The red rose bush stood proud in the center, its buds promising future blooms. She pressed her hand against the cool glass, her heart full of gratitude. "Thank you, God, for second chances," she whispered, and the moonlit garden seemed to shimmer in response. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Mary Ann's table, casting warm patches of light across the checkered tablecloths. The bell above the door chimed continuously as customers filed in and out. Mary Ann wiped her brow with the back of her hand, her apron dusted with flour from the morning's baking. "2 more orders of the special, Mary Ann," called Sarah, one of the waitresses, as she hurried past with a loaded tray. "Coming right up." Mary Ann's voice was cheerful despite her tired eyes. The diner hadn't seen this kind of business in years. Every table was full, and there was even a small line forming outside during peak hours. She glanced at the garden through the kitchen window. The flowers Ethan had planted were blooming beautifully. Their sweet scent drifted in whenever someone opened the back door. The thought of him made her smile, even as she rushed to keep up with orders. Around mid-morning, Jenny, the youngest waitress, rushed into the kitchen with her phone in hand. Her face was flushed with excitement. "Mary Ann, you need to see this." "Honey, I'm up to my elbows in biscuit dough." Mary Ann laughed, but Jenny's expression made her pause. "It's all over social media," Jenny insisted, holding up her phone. Someone posted about the mystery man helping at the diner. Mary Ann's hands stilled in the dough. "What do you mean?" Jenny scrolled through her phone. "Listen to this. Inside scoop, the handsome stranger helping at Mary Ann's table? Sources say he's none other than former food critic Ethan Cole. spotted numerous times at the local hotspot, coinciding with recent mysterious glowing reviews. The rolling pin clattered to the counter. Marianne grabbed a dish towel to clean her hands, leaving floury fingerprints on her apron. "Let me see that." The blog post was accompanied by several candid photos: Ethan fixing the garden fence, serving coffee, laughing with customers. The latest one showed him and Marianne dancing at the Harvest Festival, their faces closed, lost in conversation. "There's more," Jenny said, quietly. "People are commenting that the review must have been biased because you gave him free food. They're saying it was all planned." Marianne sank onto a nearby stool, her legs suddenly weak. The warmth of the kitchen felt stifling. "But that's not, we never." The bell chimed again, and Sarah poked her head in. "Marianne, there's a reporter from the Willow Creek Chronicle asking for you." "Tell them I'm busy," Marianne said quickly, her mind racing. How had everything unraveled so fast? Just this morning, she'd been worried about running out of bacon for the breakfast rush. She scrolled through the comments under the blog post, each one making her heart sink further. So much for an honest review. Bet that free meal tasted extra special. Makes you wonder what else they're hiding. The phone started ringing. First the diner's landline, then her cell phone. She ignored both, trying to think clearly through the panic rising in her chest. More customers were gathering at the counter now, phones in hand, whispering and pointing. Some were taking pictures of the diner's interior. A few were leaving negative reviews on social media, questioning the authenticity of everything: the food, the service, even Marianne's intentions. "Should we say something?" Jenny asked, wringing her hands in her apron. "Maybe if we explain." But Marianne couldn't find the words. How could she explain something she hadn't even known herself at first? By the time she'd discovered Ethan's identity, their friendship had already begun to bloom into something more precious than any review. The afternoon crawled by in a haze of anxiety. Marianne moved through her tasks mechanically, her usual warm greetings feeling forced. Every time the bell chimed, she tensed, expecting more reporters or angry customers. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the diner's worn floors, she heard the familiar sound of Lily's laughter. The bell chimed one more time, and there they were, Ethan holding the door open for his daughter, both wearing bright smiles. Lily skipped to the counter, her backpack bouncing. "Miss Marianne, Daddy helped me with my science project today. We made a volcano." But Marianne couldn't match the child's enthusiasm. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone, pulling up the viral post. "Ethan," she said softly, "we need to talk." She turned the phone toward him, watching as his smile faded. The warm evening light streaming through the windows suddenly felt cold. In that moment, as Ethan's face drained of color, Marianne realized that sometimes the sweetest beginnings could turn bitter in an instant. "Oh no," he whispered, scanning the comments. Lily looked between them, her small face crumpling in confusion. Marianne's heart ached as she watched him read, knowing that the peaceful bubble they'd been living in had finally burst. The kitchen of Marianne's table was unusually quiet that evening, the normal clatter of pots and pans replaced by a heavy silence. Steam rose from a pot of forgotten soup on the stove as Marianne stood facing Ethan, her hands trembling as she held up her phone showing the viral blog post. "Did you write it?" Her voice cracked. "That beautiful review about kindness and second chances, was that you?" Ethan's shoulders slumped, his face a mixture of shame and resignation. He glanced through the kitchen window where Lily sat at their usual booth, coloring with crayons, blissfully unaware of the tension building in the kitchen. "Yes," he admitted softly. "I wrote it because what you did that night meant everything to us. You showed kindness when I least deserved it." Marianne pressed her lips together, fighting back tears. "So you are him, the food critic everyone's been talking about? And you let me think." She turned away, bracing herself against the steel counter. "I never meant to deceive you," Ethan said, taking a step forward. "When you helped us that night, it wasn't about being a critic anymore. It was about being human again." The kitchen door swung open as Sarah, the evening waitress, rushed in. "Marianne, table 4 just canceled their order. They're saying—" She stopped short, looking between them. "They're saying the whole thing was staged for publicity." Marianne's face paled. She grabbed her phone again, scrolling through a flood of new comments. "People are canceling their reservations," she whispered. "They think I paid you to write that review. That I knew who you were all along." "That's not true." Ethan's voice rose with desperation. "I'll explain everything to them." You'll what?" Marianne turned to face him, her eyes glistening. Write another review? Make everything worse? She shook her head. I trusted you, Ethan. Every day you came in here, fixed things, talked with me. Was any of it real? All of it was real, he insisted. The review, the friendship, everything. Please, let me make this right. The kitchen door swung open again. This time it was Tom, the evening cook. 3 more cancellations, he reported grimly. And there's people posting negative comments about us online. They're saying we're frauds. Marianne closed her eyes, years of hard work crumbling around her. When she opened them again, they were filled with a deep sadness. You should go, she said quietly to Ethan. Please, just go. Marianne, wait. I said go. Her voice broke on the last word, echoing off the kitchen walls. Ethan stood there for a moment longer, words failing him. Finally, he turned and walked out to the dining room. Lily looked up from her coloring as he approached. Come on, sweetheart, he said softly. We need to head home. But I'm not finished with my picture for Miss Marianne, Lily protested, holding up a half-colored drawing of the diner. Another time, Ethan said, helping her gather her crayons. He could feel the stares of the remaining customers, their whispers following them to the door. Back in their apartment, Ethan moved quickly, throwing clothes into a duffel bag. Lily stood in the doorway of his bedroom, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Why are we packing, Daddy? We need to visit Grandma for a while, he explained, trying to keep his voice steady. Remember how she lives in the big city? But what about Miss Marianne? Lily's lower lip trembled. In my school, and sometimes? Ethan knelt before her. We have to leave places to protect the people we care about. He brushed a tear from her cheek. Even when it hurts. An hour later, their old sedan cruised down Main Street. The lights of Marianne's table were already dark, though it was barely 8 o'clock. Usually, the warm glow from its windows lit up the whole block at this hour. Lily pressed her face against the back window, watching the diner disappear into the darkness. Daddy, she sniffled. Why did Miss Marianne stop smiling? Ethan gripped the steering wheel tighter, his own vision blurring with tears. In the rearview mirror, the Marianne's table sign grew smaller and smaller until it vanished completely into the night. The morning sun cast long shadows through the windows of Marianne's table, but the usual warmth was missing. Marianne's footsteps echoed in the empty diner as she walked past vacant booths and chairs, still tucked neatly under tables from the night before. The cheerful open sign hung in the window, its red neon glow a stark contrast to the stillness inside. She ran her fingers along the smooth counter where, just days ago, regulars had sat shoulder to shoulder, sharing stories over steaming cups of coffee. Now, only scattered crumbs remained as evidence of busier times. Miss Marianne? Sarah, her youngest waitress, stood in the kitchen doorway, nervously twisting her apron. Should we start prep for lunch? Marianne forced a smile. Of course, honey. Just like any other day. But it wasn't like any other day. The phone hadn't rung once this morning. No familiar faces had pressed against the windows, waving as they passed. The regular morning rush teachers, grabbing coffee, construction workers, ordering hearty breakfasts, had evaporated overnight. In the kitchen, Joe, her longtime cook, was preparing dough with mechanical movements. His usual whistling was absent, replaced by the soft whir of the overhead fan. Made extra biscuits, he said quietly, just in case. The just in case hung heavy in the air. They all knew there wouldn't be a rush today. Jenny, another waitress who'd been with Marianne for 5 years, approached with worry etched on her face. My sister saw more comments online. People are saying. She trailed off, unable to finish. I know what they're saying. Marianne's voice was steady despite the ache in her chest. The accusation stung that she'd manipulated a food critic, staged the whole thing for publicity, betrayed the town's trust. She retreated to the kitchen's quiet corner where a small wooden cross hung on the wall. Closing her eyes, she whispered, Lord, give me strength. Show me the way through this storm. Her prayer was interrupted by the sound of chairs being moved in the dining room, Sarah and Jenny setting up for a lunch crowd that might never come. Across town, in his modest apartment, Ethan sat at his desk, staring at the blank document on his laptop screen. The cursor blinked accusingly, reminding him of all the words he couldn't find. Lily was at school, and the silence pressed in around him. He'd tried writing about local events, about recipes, about anything that might earn him a paycheck. But every topic led him back to Marianne's table, to warm cornbread and warmer smiles. to the way Lily's face had lit up when Marianne taught her how to fold napkins into swans. The half-finished article about the town's upcoming fall festival mocked him. How could he write about community when he'd just torn one apart? His fingers hovered over the keyboard, then dropped uselessly to his lap. On his desk sat the thank you notes he'd been writing to potential employers, to old colleagues, to anyone who might give him another chance. But the words felt hollow now, just like they had years ago when his harsh review had destroyed another person's dreams. The sounds that had become his daily comfort were missing. No plates clinking, no coffee machine humming, no laughter from the kitchen where Marianne would. He shook his head, trying to clear the thought. The afternoon stretched ahead, empty and silent, except for the soft ticking of the wall clock Lily had picked out at a yard sale. Back at the diner, the lunch hour came and went. 2 customers had come in, both tourists who hadn't heard the news. They'd left generous tips, making Marianne's heart ache even more. Maybe we should close early? Jenny suggested, gently, around 3 o'clock. Save on utilities? Marianne looked at her small staff, faithful friends who'd stuck with her through slow winters and busy summers. I can't afford to keep you all on if this continues, she admitted, her voice thick. If you need to look for other work, we're not going anywhere, Joe interrupted firmly from the grill. This place is home. Sarah and Jenny nodded in agreement, but Marianne saw the worry in their eyes. She'd built this place on trust and kindness, the very things people now questioned. Evening crept in slowly, bringing with it dark clouds and the first drops of rain. Marianne sat at her usual spot at the counter, a cup of cooling coffee in front of her. The staff had gone home despite their protests, leaving her alone with her thoughts. The rain picked up, drumming against the windows and roof. Each drop seemed to echo the questions in her heart. Had she been foolish to trust so easily? To open her heart to a stranger? To believe in second chances? Miles away, Ethan sat at his desk, listening to the same rain. His laptop was closed now, another day's work abandoned. Lily's drawings of the diner were still pinned to the wall, bright crayon sketches of smiling faces and steaming plates of food. The rain continued its steady rhythm, a melancholy soundtrack to their separate solitudes. Neither knew that across town, the other was sitting alone, remembering shared laughter and quiet moments, wondering if some bridges, once broken, could ever be rebuilt. In the dim light of her empty diner, Marianne traced patterns in the condensation on her coffee cup. The open sign still glowed in the window, its reflection rippling in the rain-streaked glass like tears. 2 days crept by like molasses in winter at Marianne's table, each hour stretching longer than the last. The morning light filtered through the windows with its usual golden warmth, casting familiar patterns on the worn linoleum floor that had seen thousands of footsteps over the years. Dust motes danced in the sunbeams, the only movement in a space that should have been bustling with the breakfast rush. Marianne stood behind the counter, mechanically wiping down surfaces that were already spotless. The coffee pot gurgled its lonely song, brewing enough for a crowd that wouldn't come. The silence pressed against her ears like cotton, broken only by the occasional car passing on Main Street and the distant hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. She'd grown accustomed to the rhythm of morning conversations, farmers discussing weather patterns over black coffee, teachers grabbing quick breakfast before heading to school, retirees settling in for their daily dose of gossip and companionship. Now, the empty booths seemed to mock her with their vacancy. Red vinyl seats, cold and unwelcoming. The bell above the front door chimed, and Marianne's heart leaped with foolish hope before she saw it was Jenny, the postal carrier, pushing through with her familiar blue uniform and weathered mailbag slung across her shoulder. "Morning, Marianne," Jenny called out, her breath visible in small puffs in the chilly autumn air that rushed in behind her. The door swung shut with its usual squeak, a sound Marianne had been meaning to fix for months, but somehow never found the time. "Got something different for you today." She held up a small brown package wrapped in what looked like newspaper comics and secured with bright purple tape that caught the light like a beacon. Marianne set down her dish rag and stepped out from behind the counter, her sneakers making soft squeaking sounds against the linoleum. The familiar ache in her lower back reminded her she'd been standing too long, trying to stay busy when there was nothing meaningful to do. "That's odd. I wasn't expecting anything." She extended her hands to take the package, immediately noticing how light it felt, almost weightless except for the love that seemed to radiate from it. The address caught her attention, first the careful but unmistakably childish handwriting on the front that read, "To Miss Marianne," in purple crayon. Each letter had been formed with the kind of determination only a child possessed, some slightly crooked but all perfectly legible. The "men" in Marianne was larger than the other letters, as if Lily had started with extra enthusiasm before settling into a more careful rhythm. Her heart skipped a beat, then began racing like a hummingbird's wings. She knew that handwriting had seen it just days ago on a birthday thank you card that still hung on her refrigerator at home, secured with a magnet shaped like a strawberry that Lily had particularly admired. "Lily," she whispered, her fingers trembling slightly as they traced the purple letters. The crayon had pressed deep into the paper, leaving little ridges she could feel beneath her fingertips. Sarah, who had been methodically refilling salt shakers at a nearby table, one of the few tasks left to keep them busy in the empty diner, drifted closer with curiosity written across her young face. Her footsteps were careful, as if she sensed this moment required reverence. "Who's it from?" Marianne didn't answer right away. She couldn't find her voice, couldn't tear her gaze away from the careful handwriting that spoke of love and effort and the kind of pure intention that only children possessed. She carried the package to her usual spot at the counter, to the red vinyl stool where she'd shared so many conversations with Ethan and Lily over the past weeks. The seat still held the slight impression where Lily would wiggle as she told animated stories about school friends or showed off her latest crayon masterpieces, her legs swinging because they didn't quite reach the floor. The afternoon light slanted through the windows differently now, creating new shadows and highlighting the empty spaces where laughter used to echo. Marianne could almost hear Lily's voice, bright and musical, asking endless questions about cooking and life and whether angels really had wings. With movements as careful as handling spun glass, Marianne began to unwrap the package. The comic pages came away easily, revealing newspaper funnies that had been selected with obvious care. She could see Garfield and Snoopy among the characters, comics that would appeal to an 8-year-old's sense of humor. Beneath the colorful wrapping lay a folder decorated with heart stickers in various shades of pink and red, along with more purple crayon drawings of flowers and butterflies that danced around the edges. Her breath caught in her throat as she opened the folder. Inside lay a piece of construction paper that made the world suddenly seem brighter and more hopeful than it had in days. The paper was slightly wrinkled, as if it had been worked on multiple times, erased and redrawn until it met Lily's exacting standards. It was a drawing, clearly done with all the love and attention an 8-year-old could muster. Every detail had been considered, from the careful choice of colors to the way the figures were positioned to show their connection to each other. There was the diner, instantly recognizable by its distinctive red and white striped awning, and the neon sign that Lily had painstakingly copied, complete with the cursive script that spelled out Marianne's table. She'd even included the window boxes with their cheerful flowers, though they were rendered in shades of purple and orange that existed only in a child's imagination. In front of the diner stood 3 figures, drawn with the earnest attention to detail that spoke of deep affection. A tall man with carefully colored brown hair wore a smile that reached his eyes, something Marianne recognized as purely Ethan, captured in the way only someone who truly saw him could manage. Beside him stood a little girl with yellow pigtails that stuck out at jaunty angles, her stick-figure arms raised in joy. And there, unmistakably, was a woman in a blue apron, with wavy, gray-streaked hair that somehow managed to look both dignified and warm. Marianne touched the figure she knew was meant to be her, tracing the careful lines with one finger. Lily had drawn her with outstretched arms, holding what looked like a plate of pancakes, with steam rising in careful spirals. Around the steam, stars and hearts floated like a constellation of kindness, each one colored with different crayons, as if to show they came in all varieties. But it was the note attached with a small piece of tape that finally broke the dam, holding back her emotions. Written in Lily's careful print, with flowers and smiley faces decorating the margins, the words seemed to glow on the page. "Miss Marianne, you made Daddy smile again. He was so sad after Mommy went to heaven, but now he laughs like he used to. You have magic in your pancakes and kindness in your heart. Thank you for feeding our hearts when they were hungry. Love forever and always, Lily P.S. Daddy says you're an angel, but I think you're better because angels live far away, and you live right here where we can visit." A tear splashed onto the paper before Marianne even realized she was crying, creating a small, dark circle that made the construction paper wrinkle slightly. She quickly wiped it away with the back of her hand, careful not to smudge any of the precious crayon marks, but more tears followed in a steady stream. These weren't tears of sadness, though they were something else entirely. Relief, maybe. Gratitude, the recognition that love had been given freely and received completely. Sarah appeared at her elbow with a tissue from the dispenser they kept near the register, her young face creased with concern. "Are you okay?" Marianne nodded, unable to speak for a long moment. The words seemed lodged somewhere between her heart and her throat, too big and too precious to voice carelessly. She thought about Ethan's face when he'd first walked into her diner, guarded and cautious, expecting judgment, trying so hard to make his daughter's birthday special, despite the humiliation of an empty wallet. She remembered how that face had slowly transformed over the weeks, the walls coming down brick by brick like a fortress learning to trust. She could trace the progression, the first tentative smile, the gradual relaxation of his shoulders, the way his laugh had grown fuller and more genuine until he could express joy freely again. And Lily, sweet, perceptive Lily, who saw the world with the clarity that only children possessed. Lily, who had somehow understood that grown-ups needed feeding in ways that had nothing to do with food. That kindness was its own form of nourishment. Out of the mouths of babes, Marianne finally managed, her voice thick with emotion and wonder. She looked around her empty diner with new eyes, seeing past the vacant tables and silent booths. The morning light seemed warmer now, more welcoming. The space didn't look quite so lonely anymore. Instead, the empty tables seemed to be waiting patiently, like old friends ready to welcome new stories and fresh conversations. They were prepared for the next chapter, whatever it might bring. Standing up with renewed purpose, Marianne walked behind the counter to where she kept the tape dispenser near the old cash register. Her movements were deliberate now, filled with intention. With the same care she might use to hang a priceless painting, she positioned Lily's drawing on the wall where everyone could see it, right next to the faded photo of the diner's grand opening 20 years ago. The morning light caught the crayon marks just right, making them shine like stained glass windows in a cathedral of everyday miracles. As she stepped back to admire the placement, Marianne whispered to the empty room, "Maybe this isn't the end. Maybe it's just the beginning of something different." The drawing hung there like a beacon of hope, 3 smiling faces looking out over the diner with expressions of pure contentment. It served as a reminder that sometimes the most important things served across a counter had nothing to do with food at all. They were about recognition, acceptance, and the kind of love that saw people exactly as they were and found them worthy of care. In the quiet of the morning, surrounded by empty tables that no longer felt quite so empty, Marianne felt something shift inside her chest. It was small but significant, like the first green shoot pushing through winter soil, hope, perhaps, or maybe just the recognition that love given freely always found its way back home. Ethan trudged up the apartment stairs, his shoulders heavy from another day of unsuccessful job hunting. The familiar creaking of the 3rd step barely registered as his mind wandered back to Marianne's table, to warm smiles and the scent of fresh-baked biscuits that had become home. He fumbled with his keys, but before he could unlock the door, Mrs. Rodriguez from next door poked her head out. "Your little one's been awful quiet in there," she said with a gentle smile. "Usually I hear her singing." Ethan's head snapped up. He'd left Lily with their elderly neighbor while he went to interviews, but she was supposed to be at Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment. His heart raced as he quickly unlocked the door. "Lily?" he called out, stepping inside. The soft tapping of keyboard keys drew him to the small desk in the corner where his old laptop sat. Lily hunched over it, her tongue poking out in concentration as she carefully typed one letter at a time. "Sweetie, what are you doing?" Ethan asked, moving closer. Lily jumped slightly, then turned with that disarming smile that always reminded him of her mother. "I'm helping Miss Marianne, Daddy, like she helped us." Ethan peered over her shoulder at the screen. His breath caught as he read the words she'd typed on a community message board. "Dear everyone, my name is Lily Cole. I'm 8 years old. I want to tell you about Miss Marianne and her special diner. When Daddy and I were sad and didn't have much money, she gave us food and smiles for free. She didn't know us, but she was kind anyway. Miss Marianne made Daddy smile again. He used to look at food and be sad, but now he looks at food and remembers how to be happy. Her diner isn't just a place for eating, it's where hearts get full too. Some people are saying mean things about Daddy and Miss Marianne, but they're wrong. Love isn't wrong. Kindness isn't wrong. Please come back to Marianne's table. The pancakes taste like hugs, and everyone deserves a hug sometime. Love, Lily. Below the text, she'd attached a slightly blurry phone photo she'd taken of the diner's exterior, the neon sign glowing warmly against the evening sky. Lily, Ethan whispered, his voice thick with emotion. How did you, Mrs. Rodriguez, help me with the hard words? She explained, fidgeting with her sleeve. And she showed me how to use your old phone to put the picture on the computer. Are you mad? Ethan knelt beside her chair, gathering her into a tight hug. No, sweetheart, I'm not mad at all. He looked at the screen again, at his daughter's honest words laid bare for the world to see. His finger hovered over the mouse, tempted to delete it, to protect them both from more public scrutiny, but Lily's small hand covered his. Please, Daddy? Miss Marianne needs help getting her smiles back, too. With a deep breath, Ethan clicked post. That night, as he tucked Lily into bed, his phone buzzed, then buzzed again. And again, confused, he opened his email to find notifications flooding and people were sharing Lily's post. Hundreds of them, then thousands. Comments poured in. This brought tears to my eyes. True kindness should be celebrated, not questioned. I remember when Marianne's table helped my family during hard times too. That little girl understands more about grace than most adults. By midnight, local news stations were picking up the story. Someone had started a fundraiser for the diner. The hashtag number Pancakes with Grace was trending in their region. When dawn broke, Ethan's phone rang. It was Sarah, one of Marianne's waitresses. You need to get down here, she said, her voice trembling with excitement. You won't believe what's happening. 20 minutes later, Ethan and Lily stood across the street from Marianne's table, staring in amazement. A line stretched around the block. People clutched printed copies of Lily's post, phones displaying the viral story, all waiting patiently to get in. Inside, through the window, they could see Marianne. She stood frozen behind the counter, one hand pressed to her mouth as customer after customer approached her. They weren't just ordering food, they were sharing stories, leaving generous tips, hugging her. An elderly man near the front of the line turned to his wife and said, loud enough for others to hear, "We drove 2 hours to get here. Figured it was time we tried those pancakes with a side of grace everyone's talking about." Marianne looked up then and saw them through the window. Her eyes met Ethan's, brimming with tears but sparkling with joy. She gestured for them to come inside, and the crowd parted respectfully to let them through. As they entered, the bell above the door chiming familiar and sweet, someone started clapping. Others joined in until the whole diner rang with applause, not for the food critic who'd once wielded such power, but for the little girl who understood that sometimes the greatest reviews are written by the heart. Marianne stood there in disbelief as more customers kept arriving, each one saying some variation of the same thing. We came for the pancakes with a side of grace. The evening sun cast long shadows through the apartment windows as Ethan sat at his cramped desk, absently scrolling through emails. His phone buzzed a number he hadn't seen in years. Marcus Thompson, his old editor at the Culinary Review Network. His hand trembled slightly as he answered. Hello, Ethan? It's Marcus. Have you seen what's happening online? I've been avoiding social media lately, Ethan admitted, running a tired hand through his hair. Your daughter's post about Marianne's table, it's everywhere. Major news outlets are picking it up. The authenticity, the raw emotion. It's touching people in ways I haven't seen in years. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. What post? He quickly opened his laptop, finding Lily's letter to Marianne shared across multiple platforms. Her simple words, written with a child's pure heart, had resonated deeply. Miss Marianne made Daddy smile again. She feeds people's hearts, not just their stomachs. The post had thousands of shares, with comments pouring in from across the country. People sharing their own stories of kindness, of second chances, of small-town diners that saved their souls. Listen, Ethan, Marcus continued, his voice softer than Ethan remembered. I was wrong about you. We all were. This is the kind of food writing that matters. Not the fancy critiques or the clever takedowns. This is about how food connects people. Ethan sat in stunned silence, watching as more notifications popped up on his screen. Write about it, Marcus urged. The real story. All of it. We'll publish it nationally. After hanging up, Ethan stared at his blank document for a long moment. Then, his fingers found the keyboard, and the words began to flow. The Meal That Saved Me by Ethan Cole. 10 years ago, I destroyed a chef's career with a single review. I wielded words like weapons, more concerned with clever phrases than the lives they impacted. That chef, James Martinez, lost everything. His restaurant closed, his marriage crumbled, and I, in my arrogance, considered it merely another notch in my critical belt, until karma caught up. My reputation collapsed. My marriage ended tragically. I became a single father, scraping by on freelance work, watching my daughter try to smile through our struggles. Then, on her 8th birthday, I made her a promise I couldn't afford to keep. We walked into Mary Ann's Table, a small diner in Willow Creek, the kind of place I would have dismissed in my previous life. What happened next changed everything. My card declined. The shame burned hot as I watched my daughter's smile fade. But then Grace walked in. Mary Ann Porter, the owner, covered our meal with a gentle lie about first-time customers. She protected my dignity in front of my child. I didn't know then that she was struggling too, that her diner was barely staying afloat, that she often fed people who couldn't pay, believing that kindness matters more than profit margins. I came back to help around the diner, not because I was writing a review, but because I needed to be near that kind of goodness. I watched my daughter bloom in Mary Ann's presence. I felt my own heart healing. Yes, I wrote an anonymous review praising the diner, not for its culinary excellence, though the food is wonderful, but for its soul, for the way Mary Ann treats every customer like family, for how she taught me that food isn't about perfect presentation or innovative techniques. It's about nurturing bodies and spirits alike. When my identity was revealed, I ran, again. But my 8-year-old daughter showed more courage than I did. She shared her truth online, and thousands responded. Because what Mary Ann offers isn't just meals, it's hope. It's proof that second chances exist, that kindness prevails, that grace can be found in the most unexpected places. To James Martinez, I'm deeply sorry. My words hurt you irreparably, and no apology can undo that damage. But Mary Ann Porter taught me what you knew all along, that food should bring people together, not tear them apart. To Mary Ann, your compassion changed me. You showed me that true hospitality isn't about perfect service or flawless cuisine. It's about making room at your table for everyone, especially those who can't repay you. To my daughter Lily, thank you for teaching Daddy how to smile again. And to everyone reading this, find your Mary Ann's Table, that place where grace is always on the menu, where second chances come with a side of hope, where healing happens one meal at a time. Because sometimes the simplest meal can save your soul. Ethan hit send with trembling fingers. Within hours, the article went viral, spreading even faster than Lily's post. Major news networks picked up the story. Mary Ann's Table started trending. Meanwhile, in her quiet diner kitchen, Mary Ann sat on a worn stool, tears falling freely as she read Ethan's words on her old tablet. The morning sun streamed through the windows, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. Her coffee grew cold beside her, forgotten. She traced her fingers over the screen, over his words about grace and second chances, about how she had changed him, about how her simple act of kindness had rippled out into something so much bigger than herself. He came back just in a different way, she whispered to the empty diner, her voice thick with emotion. She folded her hands and bowed her head, offering a quiet prayer of gratitude for the mysterious ways God worked in people's lives. The bell above the door chimed, and she quickly wiped her eyes. The first customer of the day was walking in, holding a printout of Ethan's article. Mary Ann straightened her apron, took a deep breath, and stepped forward to welcome them with the same grace that had started it all. The autumn evening painted Willow Creek's main street in warm hues of orange and gold. String lights twinkled across Mary Ann's Table's front window, and the sounds of laughter and clinking plates drifted out into the cool air. Inside, the diner buzzed with life, every table filled with local families gathering for what Mary Ann had dubbed her Community Thank You Dinner. She'd pushed all the mismatched tables together to form one long, family-style setup, draped with checkered tablecloths and mason jars filled with wildflowers. The aroma of her signature pot roast and fresh-baked rolls wrapped around the room like a warm hug. Children darted between chairs while parents passed steaming platters back and forth. Old Mrs. Henderson from the flower shop chatted with Tom, the mailman, their usual social barriers melting away over shared bowls of creamy mashed potatoes. Even Mayor Wilson had shown up, his usual formal demeanor softened by the casual atmosphere and second helpings of apple cobbler. Mary Ann moved through the crowd, refilling water glasses and touching shoulders gently as she passed. Her eyes crinkled with joy behind wisps of graying hair that had escaped her neat bun. The diner hadn't just recovered, it had transformed into something even more special. A true gathering place where neighbors became family. "Miss Mary Ann," called little Tommy from the hardware store, holding up his empty plate. "Can I have more of your magic green beans?" She laughed, the sound mixing with the general merriment. Magic. Green beans? They're just regular beans, with a little love, sweetheart. That's what makes them magic, Tommy insisted, and several adults nodded in agreement. The bell above the door chimed softly, almost lost in the din of conversation. Mary Ann turned, and her breath caught in her throat. Ethan Cole stood in the doorway, holding a bouquet of mixed wildflowers and garden roses. He looked uncertain, almost fragile, in his simple blue button-down shirt and khakis. His eyes found hers across the room, carrying questions he couldn't voice. The conversations around them continued, but for Mary Ann, time seemed to slow. She noticed how his hands gripped the flowers a little too tightly, how his shoulders carried tension despite his attempt at a casual stance. He'd lost weight since she'd last seen him, and shadows lingered under his eyes. She felt her heart soften. The anger she'd held onto these past weeks melted away like snow in spring sunshine. His article had brought not just customers, but understanding. People came now, not for perfect food, but for the promise of kindness. They'd gotten the point he'd tried to make all along. Mary Ann set down her coffee pot and walked slowly toward him. The room grew quieter as people noticed, conversations dropping to whispers. Everyone knew their story. Now it had become almost legendary in their small town. "I wasn't sure if I should come," Ethan said softly when she reached him, "but I couldn't stay away. Not from this place, not from—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "These are beautiful," Mary Ann said gently, taking the flowers. Their hands brushed, and neither pulled away immediately. "Would you like to step outside for a moment?" He nodded gratefully, and they moved to the small side porch where they'd shared so many conversations before everything fell apart. The evening air carried the scent of approaching autumn, and crickets chirped in the gathering dusk. "I'm so sorry, Mary Ann," Ethan began, his voice rough with emotion. "I should have told you who I was from the beginning. I should have—" "Shh," Mary Ann interrupted, touching his arm lightly. "I've had time to think. You know what I realized? You never actually lied to me. You just let me see the real you instead of your reputation. And that person, that man who helped fix my leaky faucet and made my customers laugh, that's who I want to know." Ethan's eyes glistened in the porch light. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "Maybe that's exactly why you need it," Mary Ann replied softly. "Grace isn't about deserving. It's about giving people room to heal and grow. You taught me that, actually, with your article. It made me see my diner through new eyes." Before Ethan could respond, the screen door burst open and Lily flew out, her blue dress swirling around her legs. "Daddy! Miss Mary Ann!" She crashed into them both, her small arms somehow managing to hug them at the same time. "I knew you'd come," she exclaimed, beaming up at her father. "I told Miss Mary Ann you would. I saved you some pot roast. It's even better than last time." Mary Ann laughed, the remaining tension dissolving in the face of Lily's pure joy. "Your daddy better come taste it then, shouldn't he?" They walked back inside together, Lily between them, chattering about how she'd help set the tables and fold the napkins. Fancy style. The conversation in the diner dropped momentarily as they entered, then swelled again with warm welcomes as people called out to Ethan. "Hey, food critic," called old Mr. Peterson from his corner seat. "Come tell me if these mashed potatoes are lumpy enough for you." The room erupted in good-natured laughter, and Ethan's face reddened even as he grinned. Mary Ann looked around her diner at the families, sharing food and stories. At Lily proudly showing her father the napkin flowers she'd made. At the way the warm light seemed to wrap around them all like a blessing. The room buzzed with something more than just dinner conversation. It hummed with forgiveness, with second chances, with the kind of love that turns strangers into family. She caught Ethan's eye across the room and smiled softly. "Seems grace really is contagious," she said, just loud enough for him to hear. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Willow Creek Community Bank, casting warm patches of light across the polished wooden floors. Mary Ann sat in one of the leather chairs in the waiting area, her fingers nervously smoothing the wrinkles in her best dress, the one she saved for special occasions. Her recipe book, worn and marked with colorful tabs, rested in her lap. Ethan walked through the glass doors, dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and carrying a leather portfolio. His face brightened when he saw her, and Lily skipped in behind him, clutching her art supplies. "You didn't have to dress up," Marianne said softly, standing to greet them. "Of course I did," Ethan replied with a gentle smile. "This is important." Mrs. Patterson, the bank manager, called them into her office. The room smelled of coffee and leather, with certificates lining the walls and a view of the town square through wide windows. "So, Mrs. Patterson began, adjusting her reading glasses, "tell me about your expansion plans for Marianne's table." Marianne opened her recipe book, revealing detailed notes and calculations in her neat handwriting. "We want to create something more than just a diner," she explained, her voice growing stronger with each word. "A place where people can find not just food, but hope." Ethan leaned forward, pulling papers from his portfolio. "I'd like to invest my savings. It's modest, but combined with the recent community donations, we could transform the empty storage room into a proper community kitchen." While the adults talked numbers and permits, Lily settled herself at a small side table, colored pencils scattered around her as she sketched intently. The Meals for Hope program would focus on single parents and veterans, Marianne continued, pointing to her calculations. "We already feed anyone who's hungry, but this would make it official with proper funding and structure." Mrs. Patterson reviewed the financial documents, nodding slowly. "Your current numbers are strong, especially after the recent publicity, and with Mr. Cole's investment." She paused, looking up at them both. "I think we can make this work." Lily bounced up from her chair, holding up her drawing. "Look what I made for the new sign." The sketch showed the familiar facade of Marianne's table, but with additional details: a garden out front, tables on the sidewalk, and people of all ages sharing meals together. Above it all, in careful, childish letters, "Where grace is always on the house." Marianne's eyes welled up as she studied the drawing. "Oh, Lily, it's perfect." They spent the next hour reviewing paperwork and signing documents. Ethan's hand trembled slightly as he signed over his savings, nearly everything he had, but his eyes were clear and determined. This wasn't just an investment in a business. It was an investment in healing, in community, in second chances. After leaving the bank, they walked to the diner together. The morning rush had ended, leaving a quiet lull before lunch. Sarah, the young waitress, was wiping down tables while humming along to the old radio in the corner. "We should tell the staff first," Marianne said, gathering everyone in the kitchen. The small team clustered around the prep table: Sarah, Mike, the cook, and Jenny, who handled the register on weekends. Their faces lit up as Marianne and Ethan explained the expansion plans. "We'll need to hire more help," Marianne continued, "and learn new systems for the community kitchen program." "I can help train new volunteers," Sarah offered immediately. "My brother's a veteran. He'd love to get involved." Mike grinned, already thinking about scaling up his recipes. "The storage room's got good bones. We could fit a proper teaching kitchen in there." While the staff excitedly discussed possibilities, Ethan slipped outside to the hardware store. He returned with supplies to hang the temporary banner Lily had designed. Together, they carefully unfurled it across the front of the building. The afternoon sun caught the words "Marianne's Table" in bright gold letters, with "Where Grace is Always on the House" written beneath in warm burgundy. Passing pedestrians stopped to look, smiling and pointing. Lily stood between Marianne and her father, holding both their hands as they admired the banner. "It looks just like my drawing," she said proudly. "It sure does, sweetheart." Ethan squeezed her hand. "And soon we'll have a proper sign made." Marianne watched a young mother with two small children pause to read the banner. The woman's shoulders, which had been tense and hunched, seemed to relax slightly as she studied the words. "Would you like to come in?" Marianne called out gently. "We're about to test some new recipes for our lunch menu." The woman hesitated, then nodded gratefully. As she guided her children inside, Marianne caught Ethan's eye. His smile reflected everything she felt. This was exactly why they were doing this. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of activity. Ethan made calls to contractors about renovating the storage room. Marianne worked with Mike to plan expanded menus that could easily scale up for larger groups. Lily set up a small art station in the corner, drawing more pictures for the walls. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the diner's worn floor, Marianne stepped outside again to look at the banner. The words seemed to glow in the evening light, a promise to everyone who passed by. A soft breeze lifted the corner of the banner, making it wave gently like a flag of hope. Tomorrow, they would begin the real work of transformation. But for now, this moment felt perfect, the culmination of kindness, given and received, of trust rebuilt, of grace freely shared. The autumn sun painted golden streaks across the newly polished windows of Marianne's table. Inside, the old diner had been transformed. Fresh paint brightened the walls, and new checkered tablecloths dressed the tables. Strings of warm lights zigzagged across the ceiling, casting a gentle glow over the crowd that filled every corner of the space. Marianne stood behind the counter, her hands clasped together, taking in the sight before her. She wore a simple blue dress with her usual apron, but there was something different about her today, a sparkle in her eyes that hadn't been there before. The diner hummed with excitement as people chatted and laughed, waiting for the official reopening ceremony to begin. Ethan moved through the crowd, greeting guests with a warmth that seemed to radiate from within. He'd shed his old critic's stern demeanor completely, replacing it with genuine smiles and hearty handshakes. He paused to help an elderly veteran find a seat, then guided a young single mother and her children to a table near the front. Lily darted between tables in her favorite yellow dress, her dark curls bouncing as she handed out hand-drawn programs she'd made herself. "The ceremony's about to start," she announced importantly to anyone who would listen. "Daddy says it's going to be special." At the front of the diner, near the entrance, a red ribbon stretched across the doorway. A pair of comically large scissors rested on a small table beside it, making children giggle and point. The local newspaper photographer adjusted his camera, capturing candid shots of the gathering crowd. Mayor Thompson, a portly man with kind eyes, tapped a spoon against his water glass. The chatter slowly died down as all eyes turned to the front of the room. "Friends and neighbors," he began, "we're here today to celebrate more than just the reopening of a business. We're here to celebrate the heart of our community." Marianne made her way to the front, and Ethan joined her, standing close enough that their shoulders almost touched. The mayor gestured to them both. "These two remarkable people have shown us what can happen when kindness meets determination." Ethan stepped forward first, clearing his throat. His voice, once used to critique and judge, now carried a gentle humility. "A few months ago, I walked into this diner, a broken man. I'd lost my way, forgotten what really matters in life." He glanced at Marianne, then at Lily, who beamed up at him. But sometimes, grace comes in the form of a free meal and a smile from a stranger. People nodded, some wiping away tears as they remembered the viral story that had touched hearts across the country. Ethan continued, "This isn't just a diner anymore. Marianne's table is becoming a place where anyone who needs a meal, a kind word, or just a moment of peace can find it." Marianne stepped forward next, her hands slightly trembling as she held her notes. But when she spoke, her voice was clear and strong. "My mama always said that food feeds the body, but kindness feeds the soul. Thanks to all of you, and especially to Ethan and Sweet Lily, we're going to feed both." She gestured to the new signs on the wall explaining their Meals for Hope program. "Every Tuesday and Thursday, we'll serve free meals to veterans. Single parents eat at half price any day of the week. And nobody will ever leave hungry, whether they can pay or not." Applause erupted, and several veterans in the crowd stood up, causing others to join in a standing ovation. Marianne blushed, unused to such attention, but Ethan's steady presence beside her kept her grounded. "And now," the mayor announced with a flourish, "I believe we have a special young lady who'd like to do the honors." Lily stepped forward, importantly, her face serious as Ethan helped her lift the oversized scissors. Marianne stood on her other side, and together they guided her hands toward the ribbon. "Wait!" Ethan called out suddenly. "There's one more thing." He reached under the counter and pulled out a wrapped package. "Marianne, this is for you." Marianne unwrapped it carefully, revealing a beautiful hardbound cookbook. Her eyes widened as she read the cover. "From Critics to Kitchen, A Journey Back to Love Through Food" by Ethan Cole. "Open it," Ethan urged softly. She turned to the dedication page and read aloud, her voice catching, "To Marianne, who reminded me that kindness feeds more than hunger." She paused, overwhelmed. "And to my daughter Lily, who showed me that sometimes the wisest food critics are 8 years old." Laughter and sniffles mingled in the crowd. Marianne looked up at Ethan, her eyes shining with tears. "When did you? How did you?" "I've been writing it since that first night," he admitted. "It's part cookbook, part story, our story, and all the proceeds will go to the Meals for Hope program." Before Marianne could respond, Lily tugged at their sleeves. "Can we cut the ribbon now? Pretty please?" Everyone laughed and they returned to their positions. "Ready?" Ethan asked. 1, 2, 3. They counted together. The scissors closed with a satisfying snip, and the red ribbon fluttered to the ground. Cheers and applause filled the diner as Lily jumped up and down in celebration. Marianne turned to Ethan, her eyes full of emotion. Without hesitation, she stepped forward and embraced him tightly. The room erupted in even louder applause as they held each other, framed perfectly in the soft glow of the diner's windows. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of community and the promise of new beginnings, Marianne's table truly felt like home. Lily squeezed between them, wrapping her arms around both their waists, completing the picture of healing, hope, and the power of second chances. The evening light filtered through the tall windows of Marianne's table, casting long golden shadows across the well-worn wooden floor. The warm glow touched every corner of the bustling diner, illuminating the cheerful yellow walls adorned with hand-drawn pictures from local children and faded photographs of the town's history. The familiar symphony of clinking silverware, gentle laughter, and heartfelt conversations filled the air as regulars and newcomers alike gathered around mismatched tables, sharing meals that tasted of love and stories that bound them together like family. At a corner booth tucked slightly apart from the evening bustle, Marianne, Ethan, and Lily sat together in their favorite spot, the same booth where everything had begun months ago. Their plates sat before them, steaming with generous portions of Marianne's famous pot roast, tender garden vegetables that Tom had roasted to perfection, and fluffy mashed potatoes that melted like butter on the tongue. The aroma of rosemary and thyme drifted up from their meal, mixing with the sweet scent of fresh bread that always seemed to fill the diner. Lily bounced excitedly in her seat, her legs swinging beneath the table in a rhythm all her own. Her dark hair caught the lamplight as she moved, and her eyes sparkled with the kind of pure enthusiasm that only an 8-year-old could possess. "Can I tell the story about how we met, Miss Marianne? Please? Please?" She reached eagerly for a warm dinner roll from the basket, her small fingers carefully breaking it open to watch the steam escape. "I love telling this story." Marianne smiled, her weathered hands smoothing the familiar fabric of her favorite apron, the one with tiny sunflowers that Lily had helped her pick out at the local shop. The lines around her eyes crinkled with genuine warmth as she watched the little girl's animated face. "Of course, sweetheart, though I think we all remember that night pretty well." She glanced meaningfully at Ethan, who was trying to hide his smile behind his coffee mug. "It was my birthday," Lily began, her voice taking on the dramatic rhythm of a natural storyteller. She straightened in her seat, clearly relishing her role as narrator. "And Daddy promised me dinner at a real restaurant, just like we used to do before Mommy went to heaven. I wore my best dress, the blue one with the butterflies, and I was so excited because Daddy hadn't smiled much in a really long time." She paused to take a bite of her roll, butter dripping down her chin before she wiped it away with her napkin. Ethan cleared his throat softly, cutting into his pot roast with careful precision. A faint blush crept up his neck as the memory washed over him. "Not my proudest moment, I have to admit. Standing there while that card declined, feeling like the worst father in the world." His voice trailed off for a moment before he lifted his eyes to meet Marianne's gentle gaze. "But looking back now, seeing where we are today." He reached across the table and squeezed Marianne's weathered hand, feeling the calluses that spoke of years of hard work and service. "It might have been the best thing that ever happened to us." "The look on your face that night," Marianne recalled softly, her thumb tracing gentle circles over Ethan's knuckles. "I just couldn't bear it. You looked so lost, so ashamed. And this precious little girl was trying so hard to make you feel better." She glanced at Lily with maternal affection. "Sometimes God puts us exactly where we need to be, even when we can't see His plan, even when everything feels broken." The diner hummed with familiar life around them, a tapestry of voices and stories that had become as comforting as a favorite song. Through the pass-through window to the kitchen, they could see Tom in his element, his gruff exterior softened by concentration as he expertly flipped a stack of pancakes. Breakfast for dinner remained a customer favorite, especially among the kids. His weathered hands moved with the practiced grace of someone who had found his calling in feeding others, even if he'd never admit to the sentimentality of it. Sarah, their newest waitress and a single mother herself, wove gracefully between the tables with practiced efficiency. She carried plates of steaming comfort food to a corner table where a group of veterans had gathered for their weekly support, meeting men and women who had found in Marianne's table not just a meal, but a place where their stories mattered and their struggles were understood without judgment. "Remember when you came back the next day with those wildflowers?" Marianne asked, her eyes twinkling with mischief as she recalled the memory. I already knew who you were by then. I'd found your press badge in the wallet you left behind, but you looked so nervous standing at that door, holding those purple asters like they were the crown jewels. Because I was terrified. Ethan laughed, shaking his head at his own awkwardness. Here I was, the fallen food critic who'd lost everything because of my own cruelty, trying to thank someone for showing me more kindness than I probably deserved. I must have practiced that speech a dozen times in the car. He paused, his expression growing more serious. I kept thinking you'd slam the door in my face once you realized who I was. Lily reached over and patted his arm with the gentle wisdom that sometimes surprised the adults around her. Daddy, you always deserve kindness. You just forgot for a while because you were so sad about Mommy. Her voice was matter-of-fact, as if she were stating something as obvious as the color of the sky. But Miss Marianne helped you remember, didn't you? The adults fell silent, struck by the simple truth in her words. Through the open window, beside their booth, a warm evening breeze drifted in, carrying the sweet scent of the flowering garden they'd planted together in the spring sunflowers and zinnias, herbs and tomatoes that now supplied fresh ingredients for the kitchen. The garden had been Lily's idea, a way to make the space behind the diner more beautiful and useful. You know what I love most about this place now? Marianne said, her voice soft with emotion as she gestured toward the busy tables around them. Each one told a story. The elderly couple who came every Tuesday for their anniversary dinner, the group of teachers who gathered here to plan lessons over coffee, the teenagers who found refuge here after school when home felt too complicated. It's not just about feeding people anymore. It's about giving them a place to belong, a place where they can be themselves without fear or judgment. She paused, watching with maternal tenderness as a young single mother at a nearby table helped her twin boys with their homework while they shared a plate of chicken tenders. The woman's tired eyes held the same overwhelmed look that Marianne recognized in so many faces, the look of someone trying to hold everything together with pure determination and prayer. Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful as he followed her gaze. From that first review I wrote years ago, the one that nearly ruined Chef Martinez's life and destroyed my own soul in the process, to sitting here now. He shook his head slowly, still amazed by the journey. Sometimes I think about how different things could have been if I'd understood then what I know now about grace. If I'd learned to see the heart behind the food instead of just looking for flaws to tear apart. But you did learn? Marianne said gently, that's what matters. We all make mistakes, Ethan. The question is what we do with the pieces afterward. Speaking of that first night, Marianne's eyes suddenly danced with playful mischief as she reached for the black check holder that Sarah had quietly placed at their table edge. Should I be worried about your card declining again? Because I have to say, my heart couldn't take that kind of drama twice. Ethan burst out laughing, the sound rich and genuine as he pulled his wallet from his back pocket. With theatrical flourish, he produced a shiny new debit card, holding it up like a trophy. Take a look at this beauty, he said, sliding it across the table with obvious pride. Marianne picked up the card with curious fingers, and her breath caught slightly as she read the words printed beneath their names in neat official lettering. Joint account, Ethan Cole and Marianne Porter. Her fingertips traced the raised letters with wonder, and she felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. The simple piece of plastic represented so much more than just shared finances. It was a symbol of trust, of partnership, of a future they were building together one day at a time. No more declined cards, Ethan said softly, his voice thick with emotion. No more worrying about whether we can afford to take care of the people we love. We're in this together now, all of us. The diner, the community kitchen project, everything. Whatever comes next, we face it as a team. Lily clapped her hands together with delight, her eyes bright with mischief. Does this mean I get extra dessert? Because sharing money sounds very important and responsible, and I think responsible people should get extra dessert. Nice try, young lady. Marianne chuckled, reaching over to ruffle Lily's dark hair. Your negotiation skills are getting better every day. But you know what? I think this moment calls for something special anyway. She caught Sarah's eye and held up 3 fingers, and moments later, their waitress appeared with 3 generous slices of fresh apple pie, still warm from the oven and topped with scoops of vanilla ice cream that were already beginning to melt into sweet, creamy puddles. As they shared dessert, passing bites to each other and laughing at Lily's enthusiastic ice cream mustache, The setting sun painted the sky outside in brilliant oranges and deep pinks. The colors shifted and danced across the diner's windows, transforming the familiar space into something almost magical. Through their booth's window, they could see the diner's sign beginning to glow against the deepening twilight, its warm yellow bulbs flickering to life one by one. The words "Mary Ann's table where grace is always on the house" cast a welcoming light over the sidewalk where, not so very long ago, a broken man and his grieving daughter had stood in the growing darkness, wondering if they dared to step inside a place that looked too warm, too welcoming for people who felt as lost as they did. "You know what?" Lily said suddenly, pausing with her spoon halfway to her mouth, apple pie and ice cream dripping slightly. "We're not just customers anymore. We're not even just friends." She looked back and forth between the two adults, her expression serious and thoughtful. "We're family, like real family. The kind that chooses to love each other even when things get hard." Mary Ann felt her heart swell with such overwhelming love that she thought it might burst. She reached across the table, taking both Lily's small, sticky hand and Ethan's larger, work-roughened one in hers. "We certainly are, sweetheart. And that's the best kind of grace there is, the kind that creates family where there wasn't one before." The three of them sat together in their favorite corner booth, surrounded by the gentle buzz of conversation and the warmth of community they'd helped create. Around them, the diner continued its evening rhythm, Tom calling out orders from the kitchen, Sarah refilling coffee cups and sharing kind words with customers. The quiet conversations of people who had found in this simple place something they'd been searching for without even knowing it. Outside their window, the sign continued to glow against the deepening twilight sky, its message visible to anyone who might be walking by in need of hope. "Mary Ann's table, where grace is always on the house." And somewhere between acts of kindness and moments of forgiveness, between shared meals and chosen family, three hearts that had once been broken had found their way home again. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Cole, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.